bit behind schedule, so I won't go in too many introductory remarks. Just to say hello to our speakers today. I will make a very brief presentation of each of them. So first of all, we have Mrs. Alina Bărgăoanu, who is professor, Dean of the College of Communication and Public Relations faculty from the National University of Political Studies and Public Administration. We have with us today Mrs. Oana Popescu-Zamfir, Director of the Global Focus Center, Professor Răzvan Bologa from the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, and last but not least, Mr. Sebastian Dan Naste, Privacy and Data Protection Analyst from Cullen International. So we will have to go along in this hybrid format. I have to admit that for me it's a first. I hope we won't have any technical problems, but then again, I'm sure we'll adjust and prove our digital resilience in conference making during the times of COVID-19. So without further ado, Mrs. Bărgăoanu will start our list of presentations today with a focus on disinformation, I think, because I know she's a specialist in this domain. So Mrs. Bărgăoanu, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Again, the most frequent statement at the beginning of a conference. Can you hear me well?
Yes, everything is fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And most of all, thank you for allowing the discussion from a political point of view, sociological point of view of this topic, given the fact that your main specialty and the focus of the conference has a lot to do with technology. So really, I'm very happy that this kind of cross-breeding between disciplines has found a voice in your conference. Please allow me to open my presentation in order to provide for some visual support too. And again, the question is whether you can see the slides. Okay. So I will go rather briefly through these slides. And again, what I'm saying is right at the intersection between computer science and political science, communication science.
I don't think actually, I just see a gray square, so we don't see the slides.
You cannot see them right now?
No, it's just a gray square in the middle of the screen. So
how about now?
No, still not.
Just a minute, I will try once more, and after, if they do not work, I will skip the slides. Just a minute.
So now we can see your screen, your whole screen is shared with us, but not the slides.
I'm a very transparent person, so just a minute. Open. No. Okay, so probably I will skip the slides, and they can be made available to the conference participants. The topic of my presentation was about cognitive warfare and about its impact on the resilience of liberal democracies. This is why I was saying that it lies right at the intersection between computer science, cybersecurity, political science, communication, and tackling disinformation. So the main point that I would like to make today is that cognitive warfare is a new phenomenon. And it was on the slides. There are various names that are on the table. They are called computational propaganda, network propaganda, information warfare, cognitive warfare, ampliganda. This is the term that I have just come across, and I really appreciate it. The point that I would like to make is that we are dealing with a completely new phenomenon, which is driven by technology, which is enabled by technology, no matter how we call it. I think that this kind of awareness comes rather late into the public conversation, and we are still thinking. I have encountered very, very frequently this idea, oh, but we are dealing with propaganda, let's apply the thinking about all propaganda to the new situation and everything will be fine. I'm trying to sell this idea, to argue against this complacent idea that this is an old phenomena. And some of the arguments in favor of my idea, of this idea that we are dealing with a completely new phenomenon, are the following. First of all, as I have said, the new propaganda, the computational propaganda, the cognitive warfare is enabled, it is driven by technology. In my assessment, the current computational propaganda or network propaganda is not so much a fraud with the truth. So the major distinction is not between what is true and what is false, even if this is still a very important distinction. But the major fraud is with the engagement on social platforms. So what the technology can do very, very differently compared to traditional propaganda is that technology can manufacture both content and both the dissemination and the amplification of this kind of content. So again, the new propaganda does not dwell on this distinction between true and false, between factual and non-factual, although these distinctions are still very important. But again, the major distinction is about real engagement on social media and fake amplified engagement on social media, has the term ampliganda. Why I'm saying that this is a new phenomena, it goes straight to the people with no intermediaries, with no middlemen, no journalists, no opinion leaders, no gatekeepers, but the only gatekeepers are technological in nature too. Algorithms, big data, recommendation engines and stuff like that. So again, this is a major distinction compared to traditional propaganda, that it goes straight to the people with no intermediaries, with no gatekeepers, or we can say that these intermediaries, these gatekeepers are technological in nature. Again, big data, algorithms, recommendation mechanisms, and increasingly machine learning and artificial intelligence. The second, why I'm arguing that it is a completely new phenomena, that it is enabled and that it is driven by technology, is that it is very, very cheap. It is widely available. So it does not rely on huge amounts of money in order to achieve its end, which again I think is a huge difference compared to traditional forms of propaganda. There are other reasons, but I will simplify and say that again, the difference is that it is the new propaganda is enabled by technology, is driven by technology. It goes straight to the people without intermediaries, and it is very, very cheap and accessible. The other set of reasons for arguing in favor of the idea that the new propaganda is different from traditional forms is in terms of objective and tactics. So the objectives are much more pervasive and are much more difficult to detect. In my assessment, the objectives of contemporary propaganda, which is enabled by technology, is not to convince of the validity of an alternative model, for example, but the main objective of contemporary propaganda is to create doubt, to create confusion, uncertainty, and a generalized feeling of distrust. Again, according to my knowledge, to my research, and to my readings, the main purpose of contemporary propaganda is not necessarily to target a political candidate or to hijack a political party, for example, but I think that the overall objective is to hijack the public conversation, to change the terms of this public conversation, and to make a country very, very difficult to govern. So again, the huge differences between traditional propaganda and the new forms of propaganda have to do with its technological nature in the first place, and second, with the objectives. So again, in my assessment, the objective is not to convince, not to persuade, not to convince of the validity of an alternative model, but rather to discredit the current model of liberal democracy, to create doubt, to create information fatigue, to create a situation when people no longer make the distinction between what is true and what is false, but rather they no longer care about these things. So this will be a very broad background about the contemporary forms of propaganda. And again, which is different in terms of its technological nature, highly technological nature, and in terms of objectives. The objective is to split countries, to polarize, and to disrupt public conversation altogether. And in a very, very cynical way, you can perpetrate this kind of propaganda even if you are very pro-Western, pro-European, pro-NATO, pro-American in nature. I think that this is the most insidious feature of contemporary propaganda, that you can be very honestly and very sincerely pro-Western, but you can still be part of this kind of propaganda efforts. The last point I would like to make is that, of course, there are solutions, and I think it is important to discuss these solutions at the level of a member state such as Romania, but also at the level of the EU overall and at the level of NATO overall, I would say. So I think that the first solution is to detect the phenomenon and to expose its technological nature. And I think that this point is highly relevant for a conference such as ours today. I think that what we miss in Romania, and I think that we miss in the European Union and at the level of NATO, is to have early detection mechanisms of this kind of new propaganda, and especially related to fake engagement, trolling, digital mobbing, fake engagement, and stuff like that. So I think that I'm highly in favor of coming up with early detection system of the digital ecosystem in order to detect this kind of propaganda and to try to contain it. I think if you allow me a very short statement about what has happened in Romania with the disinformation campaigns during the vaccination effort, is that what didn't go well is that what happened in the digital platforms were allowed to flow into mainstream media and very recently right into the public television, which is shocking for me, I must say. So I think that because disinformation campaigns were pretty global in nature, there were the same narratives, but I think what other countries did well was to contain this narrative strictly to the digital environment and not to allow them to flow into mainstream media and worse, to public broadcasting. So I think that this kind of technology-driven early detection mechanisms can build awareness, can convince us that disinformation exists, and also can allow us specialists to do digital containment, again, not to allow this kind of disinformation narratives to flow from the digital environment to the mainstream media and to the private conversations. The last point, so this will be a very short term, it is not exactly short term, but I think this is the first step in order to try to counter this kind of technology-driven propaganda. The final point that I would like to make, and I will hand over to the next speakers, is that another feature of contemporary propaganda is that it exploits internal vulnerabilities. So logically speaking, it means that if you want to protect against this kind of propaganda, you have to deal with this kind of internal vulnerabilities, meaning long-term, medium-term, and long-term investments in resilience. meaning that we have to invest in our information ecosystem, including mainstream media and public broadcasters. We have to invest in awareness and in education, including digital awareness and digital literacy for high-level decision makers. So we always start with the regular users, and we miss the point that high-profile decision makers, influencers, politicians, people from the financial sector are at some point as illiterate as the very average citizen on the street. And also, I think that the solution out of this problem is good governance and the delivering of public goods. That was very briefly my presentation. Again, we are dealing with a new phenomenon, which is very, very reliant on technology. Hence, we have to come up with technology-driven solutions. And apart from this, we have to invest in resilience, including the resilience of the political class, of the decision makers, and of the whole society. Thank you very much, and I will hand over and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for this introductory presentation, Professor Bărgăoanu. Indeed, democratic recession has been highlighted in reports like the ones from Freedom House, the Economist Intelligence Unit. Larry Diamond as well highlights this threat of worldwide democratic recession, the so-called reverse third wave, if we were to use Huntington's terminology. We'll now move on to Mrs. Oana Popescu to maybe shed some more light on this concept of democratic resilience and how to enhance it and how to counter the so-called ill winds of authoritarianism, populism, and so on and so forth. So, Mrs. Oana Popescu, Director and Founder of Global Focus Center, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Bogdan, for the moderation. Thank you to the organizers for this invitation. And usually, as a panelist, you're not very happy when somebody just before you says the exact same things that you were going to say in your presentation, because that makes you look less intelligent. But in this particular case, I'm actually very grateful to Alina Bărgăoanu for making these points, and I am going to reinforce them. And before I show you the instrument that we have developed at the Global Focus Center to act as an early warning system for democratic backsliding and to highlight the areas of democratic resilience, let me consolidate some of the points that Alina made to kind of zoom out a little bit and explain why I think it is so important that while we are focused on technology, we also understand the broader context in which this is all happening. And I will reinforce the point that we have perhaps misleadingly been focusing lately on disinformation, whereas disinformation is just a part of the whole story of malign influence. We have been focusing on fabricated truths, whereas what is actually the most toxic and the most impactful is indeed propaganda. Why? Because we are living these days in a global context where we have opposing, competing systems of values and of governance that are being presented to us. We have the Western system of values and governance coming up against competition from the likes of China, of Russia, of other countries that propose an alternative worldview and organization based on different values, based on a different system of governance than the democratic one. And you may have seen the recent polls that have been published, and they have circulated intensively on social media as well, and they have caused a lot of outrage, let's say, in the social media bubbles, to see that a lot of Romanians say Romania should uphold its national interests at EU level, even if they go against EU rules, even if that is done at the risk of losing its EU membership status. And I think we should be very clear-minded about what is happening in Romanian society. Romania's foreign policy and security orientation is still very firmly pro-Western, pro-transatlantic. A majority of people asked have responded that they still see their life in the European Union. And essentially, when the most commonly asked question that reveals what people's basic beliefs are is the one that is used in many surveys and polls, which is, what kind of country would you rather be born in? And a majority of people will still respond, in a free, democratic country where I can enjoy individual liberties and I can enjoy a prosperous life. However, as Alina was rightly pointing out, at least for now, neither China nor Russia are actually proposing an alternative in the sense of leave the European Union or NATO and join, I don't know, the Eurasian Union or the Shanghai Cooperation Pact or anything of the sort. What they are proposing is pick and choose, stay part of the European Union and NATO, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to accept all the values that this club has in common. It doesn't necessarily mean you cannot negotiate the rules. And I think we have just seen this done in Poland with the ruling of the Constitutional Court, which is legally preposterous to say that once you are an EU member, any national body can decide that national law stands above EU law, because you have already accepted through the accession treaty that EU law stands above national law. However, the simple fact that there are bodies that take negotiation of EU rules and negotiation of EU values to a level of legitimacy that is lent by the institutions of the state means that the populists, the nationalists, the far right in Romania, as well as in other countries, are going to be able on social media and elsewhere to propagate the thesis that you can be part of a club and adhere to the very strict rules and values, but then at the same time change your mind and start to negotiate like in a marketplace. So this is the broader context of what is happening through propaganda, which means just putting a certain spin on various issues using countries' internal vulnerabilities. Various external actors, but primarily internal actors, and this is again something I call your attention to. Propaganda and malign influence are not primarily external, at least in Romania. They are primarily internal. The main beneficiaries, the first beneficiaries, are internal forces. External forces don't have to invest too much energy into this because we are doing their job for them. And all they need to do is watch out for where the agenda of domestic nationalists and populists overlaps with their own interests, and then reap the benefits when they need to. So, idea number one that I would like you to stay with is the importance of propaganda and of selling a specific vision of reality, not necessarily a fake reality, but a specific vision of reality that undermines the country's stability from within. And secondly, that this propaganda is primarily internal in nature, not external. And what it rests with, I will show you, I will try to share my screen in a minute to to show you exactly what I mean. Let me just see if that works. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, it works. Okay.
Okay, let me okay, good. So we have elaborated a democratic resilience index, which we have piloted in Romania, Hungary, and the Republic of Moldova, precisely to look at what are the internal vulnerabilities that these countries have. And we have specifically chosen countries with very different internal realities. Romania and Hungary are members of the EU and NATO. Moldova is not. The domestic situation is very different in all of these countries. The degree of pro-Western alignment is very different in all these countries. So we have chosen to look at their internal vulnerabilities, precisely starting from the idea that until now we have oversimplified our image of democracy, and we thought that the world was divided between democracies and autocracies, and countries around the world would either be autocratic or full-fledged democratic. And I think we have learned the hard way over the past few years now that there are actually many shades of gray. There are very different breeds of democracy, and there's always the option of democratic backsliding, of arrested development on the way to full democratic consolidation. And we have tried to identify in these countries both the signs of alarm for backsliding and the levers of democratic resilience which can be used to consolidate those societies against malign influence from within or from without. And we have looked at 4 dimensions: the political environment, the media and civil society, the economic environment, and external affairs. And we believe that these are the areas of life that influence democratic resilience. Obviously, many other categorizations are also possible. And we have chosen to look horizontally at the following categories of factors: the institutional structure, the elite agency in the sense of the importance of the people who populate these institutions, the crisis triggers, meaning those elements, whether it's critical junctures or path dependencies, for instance, a previous history of autocracy or anything similar, that are actually able to put pressure on the system, and the buffers against backsliding. To give you an example, Romania, just as other countries in the region, has been through a spell of democratic backsliding between 2017 and 2019. However, the existence of an increasingly strong up-and-coming middle class, which is quite educated with enough financial independence that they can afford to speak truth to power, has generated, we believe, the massive protests that we have seen, and then the vote that overturned a government and brought Romania back from the brink, at least for a while. So this would be one of those buffers, so elements that exist in a society where, should its democratic resilience be tested, it is likely to either resist it or to bounce back or bounce forward from it. I will not bore you with the methodological details. I will just share with you this picture of the results, which shows that actually the 3 countries are not very dissimilar. Romania is doing much better. Romania is the blue line, and it is doing much better than Hungary and Moldova. What I think is striking for us when we looked at the results is how Hungary and Moldova have come. And that is to show you that just being an EU member and a NATO member is unfortunately not necessarily a guarantee that the democratic consolidation is going to be solid and continuous. Obviously, there are differences in which areas of life are the most resilient in each country, but the overall scores are comparable. And one of the interesting findings, which I think we should all be aware of, is that for all three countries, actually, the external affairs dimension has been one of the strongest buffers against backsliding. So to translate this into common language, in the case of Romania, for instance, our strong pro-Western orientation and our foreign policy is one of the strongest buffers. However, underneath this, what we have, and I will skip right to that, is, as you can see, and we have this in common with other countries, political clientelism, politicization of the media, social polarization, low political activism, which means, for instance, that despite the fact that Romania comes out to have a very strong and fair election system, people do not trust the fact that those who end up leading them are really representing them, and they don't feel that they actually control who leads the country, because the political offer is so poor that they don't feel that fair electoral process actually gives them a fair access to controlling who represents them. We also have common resilience drivers, such as, and this comes in a way as a paradox as compared to what Alina was highlighting, and rightfully so, earlier on. The open and unrestricted access to internet is one of the main resilience drivers in Romania. And that is because eventually the availability of the possibility for communication is one of the ways in which you can ensure democracy. A long discussion needs to follow about how to actually make sure you ensure democracy and not the undermining of it. But the simple availability and access to internet is a very important driver. And then you can also read the others yourselves. I will just give you a glimpse of what the other findings are. I think the social environment is something, again, that needs to be highlighted in terms of again, access to communication, the ease of starting a media outlet or a blog, freedom of speech, media pluralism, which are higher in Romania and Moldova than in Hungary. But at the same time, you have politicization of the media, poor media independence, and high social polarization in all three countries. Now, how that influences things is that Romania also suffers from very low trust in government. And what that means, and you have seen it with the vaccination campaign, is that unfortunately you are out of sources of authoritative communication. So one of the first responses you would give when asked, so what to do about democratic resilience, how to resist, for instance, manipulation of the public messaging, would normally be, we need to step in with our own narrative. We have left the communication space empty for populists and nationalists to fill it. So we, as in the representatives of those who uphold a liberal democracy, would need to step in and promote our own narrative. But who can do that if the government or public influencers are no longer trusted by people? So I think I will skip directly to the end. Let me stop sharing my screen so we can resume. Okay, is this working? Yes, I think so. So I will close by highlighting how important it is to understand that we are at a time when the main problem we are facing is not one that can be addressed by state institutions only, much less by institutions of force only. So, you know, the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Defense, or whoever else. This is a problem that can only be addressed in a whole of society framework, because the problem affects society, because the target of propaganda are the citizens, it's the whole society, essentially civilian targets, if you wish, in a sort of an unconventional war. And if you, to give it just an example, if you look at the social media debates, you will find, and as we have when we monitored social media bubbles before Romanian elections last year, that while everybody was shocked at the appearance of a far-right party for the first time in Romania after 2008 in parliament, and that was just because mainstream media gave zero attention to the movement underneath that was generating this party. If you were looking, however, on social media, both George Simion, its leader, and the party itself were among the top influencers. They had some of the largest reach on social media bubbles. I think George Simion was second to President Klaus Iohannis or Liberal Party President Ludovic Orban. I don't remember exactly. But George Simion was second in terms of reach from among all political figures and political influencers on social media. AUR, the party, I think came fourth in terms of the most influential political influence on social media. So that is how you see what a wide gap there is between our perceptions if we live in our bubble and don't manage to reach across the aisle to the others, and what is happening in the rest of society. So I agree with what Alina was saying. We need instruments, and I hope we have developed one of them, to be aware and to monitor evolutions and to understand what is happening within our society. And then we need cooperation among state institutions, civil society, academics, the private sector, and I commend Ched for essentially trying to promote that kind of cooperation by inviting us today. So you need this cooperation in order to tackle the problem in a way that's really grounded in reality and in the best solutions to the problem. Thank you very much. And needless to say, I remain at your disposal if you want to ever have more details about the findings of our Democratic Resilience Index. If you want, I can absolutely share it, but I have gone over time already and I apologize, so I'm not going to go into more details. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oana, for sharing with us this presentation and for broadening the discussion. A lot of things to process, of food for thought. And in this context, please allow me to remind you of the U.S. administration's focus on democratic resilience, as President Biden pledged to host a summit for democracy in his first year in office in order to bolster democracy worldwide, defend against authoritarianism, fight corruption, promote respect for human rights, both abroad and at home, of course. So, and I think this is pretty much in line with what the European Union is doing, as it has an action plan for democracy, complementing its action plan against disinformation and other instruments like the rule of law mechanism. So this only goes to highlight the importance of values for the whole transatlantic community. But before moving on to our in-person speakers, please allow me to make a very short organizatoric remark, because I forgot to mention this at first. After the presentations, we will have a Q&A session in which I wholly invite our participants, both at the conference live, but also following us online, to address questions to the panelists, either via the chat option here in Teams, or in person the conference. Maybe Mihai will help me with gathering some questions from those who are present in the audience at the Palace of Parliament.
Yeah, maybe we could start with the questions from the audience and then take those from the online. Okay.
Okay, that's a plan. So now moving on to our first live panelist, Professor Răzvan Bologa, who is a professor specialized in cybernetics at the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, who will tell us more about the impact of artificial intelligence on various domains of our lives, like health, education, and others. So please, Professor Bologa, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I am really pleased that I have the chance to speak today in this very interesting conference. Now, sorry, my point of view is a little bit different. I would like to thank Alina and Oana for sharing with us their information about the importance of cognitive warfare, fighting fake news and propaganda in order to protect democratic resilience. However, I think that if we want to preserve our democracies on the long term, we need to go deeper than that, and we have to invest a lot in education. Because at the end of the day, the disinformation campaigns are successful because many times they meet with people that were not properly educated. So education is perhaps the best way to protect our democratic resilience, and we need modern education, and honestly at this very stage in time we don't have that. So let me explain to you my point of view. If you look at the demographical situation in the world, you will see that the population is aging in most areas, with the exception of some countries from sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. Most areas in the world have a fertility rate which is below 2.1. So this means that the number of persons who are older is constantly increasing. So you might wonder yourself, why is this important to democratic resilience? It's very important because in Romania, in about 20 years from now, there will be 9 million pensioners and only about 4 million or maybe 5 million employees. With the current level of productivity, it is not possible to maintain the pension funding system in place and also to provide health care to these people. There will be too many pensioners. They will also be dominant from a democratical point of view, so they will have the majority of votes. And they will be able to easily shift the course of the society by voting. So in order to solve this fundamental problem that will come in a future that is not so far, there is only one solution. Actually, there are two, but I think that only one is worth considering. That is to increase substantially the level of productivity by investing in artificial intelligence, in robotics, and many other digital technologies. With the current levels of productivity that we have, we will not be able to provide sufficient healthcare and pensions to the growing older population. And this is a ticking bomb that will create major problems in our society, and it's a major threat to our current democratic society based on human rights. We all know that the human rights are probably one of the most important achievement of the humanity, and they are now under threat because we all see that the political situation is not favorable to this approach that was creative after World War II. And in my opinion, the best solution is to invest in education. Maybe the results will not be immediate, so we need to also create tools to fight fake news, to fight propaganda. However, if we limit our efforts to immediate solutions, on the long run, our approach is not going to be sustainable. So we need to address the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is the fact that we don't have a proper educational system. The current educational system is old, is outdated, and was created for another age. It was created for the industrial age, and it is simply not suitable for social platforms, for social media, and so on. So what are we doing in Romania about this? There is a program called Romania Tech Nation, which was put together by major political players. It is being funded by the Romanian Commercial Bank, also by Dacia Renault, Global Work Foundation, and many others. And they are also it is also being supported by small local authorities, such as the city halls and so on, from big cities to small villages. And the objective of this program is to train children in robotics and other technologies that are relevant for the jobs of the future. And the program has been started. There are currently 50 children and about 2,000 professors in it. It is quite a remarkable program because it is creating a different approach in education. Sorry, I think this. Okay. So the program is quite ambitious. It aims to train 1 million children in robotics and other technologies that are relevant for the jobs of the future. In order to do this, you don't have the right teachers. I mean, you can't create such a program with the current educational infrastructure. So what we did is that we created an artificial intelligence platform, which is called nextlab.tech. And this artificial intelligence platform is capable to create virtual learning assistants that will work with children and help professors and teachers do their jobs. It worked. It was successful. We are now at the 3rd edition. And many children from rural areas, from places that very few people expected, such as Fierbin Stâg, Șimian, Poienile de sub Munte, and many other rural areas where teachers have zero expertise in advanced STEM education, children there were able to successfully complete their projects with this platform. So artificial intelligence is really the solution, as this small pilot project that aims to become a big project is showing. So if we want to create a society that is stable, we have to address the root of the problem, which is the educational system. In order to have enough time to solve this major issue that we don't have an adequate educational system, we also have to rely on short-term or medium-term solutions, such as fighting fake news, controlling the mainstream media and preventing it from sharing propaganda and so on. But this can't be a long-term solution. At some point in time, we have to create a proper foundation in order to make our democracy sustainable on the long run. So there are many problems in the Romanian educational system, such as in other educational systems in the region. So you need infrastructure. For instance, if you go today to any school, both public or private, if children would come tomorrow with laptops in their bags, they wouldn't have enough electricity sources to plug them in. So there has to be a major overhaul of the entire infrastructure in order to create a suitable digital educational environment. You also have to retrain teachers, and that's very important. They have to use innovative pedagogies. They can't continue with boards, blackboards, conventional tests and so on. And you also have to develop digital content, which is currently not happening in an organized way. Now, I will talk to you a little bit about the actors in this program. So you have an association which brings together major players from the Romanian universities, which is called Cyber Knowledge Club, which, by the way, is organizing a scientific cybersecurity conference as well. This is the association that is running the program. Then you have the Romanian Commercial Bank, which is the main sponsor. And then you have the technological partners in the program. I will skip the slides. I'll just like to share with you the process architecture. So basically, what you have here is a community of children that are interacting with an AI platform, but they are also interacting with a community of knowledge stewards. When I say knowledge stewards, I mean teachers, but I also mean volunteers, non-governmental organizations, and other players. So this is quite important because the overhaul of the Romanian educational system is not something that can come from within. Current teachers don't have the capacity to redesign it properly, so external actors have to be involved in this process. Then you must use open educational resources. It is quite critical, in my opinion, to develop such open educational resources. There are very few in the Romanian language right now, and that should be an important part of any educational strategy. And then you need to have a community of educational experts that will run this system, that have to be savvy about data science, cybersecurity, and many other advanced issues. Now, I will not insist on the other slides, just put here my contact information if you are interested to learn more about it. And before closing my presentation, I would like to add a few ideas about democratic resilience and its link to education. So it is very important to have an efficient educational system which is advocating the worldview that you want to promote in a society. I think that mainstream media, social networks, and other environments are just building on the foundation created by the educational system. So if we start to educate our children for an early age regarding human rights and democracy, they will become responsible citizens in the future, and they will not be so easily influenced by propaganda. However, this does not mean to print some books where we write good texts about democracy. We do have such texts. They are being taught in the current school, and it is simply not working. So we need to go beyond that. The current content that is presented to children around the age of 8 or 10 or 12 is simply not attractive to them. It is outdated. We have to invest in educational pedagogies, innovative ones. We have to create advanced digital content with attractive graphical systems and many other modern technologies. This is unfortunately not the case right now in Romania. There was very little investment in this, mostly from private organizations which invested out of their corporate social responsibility budgets. And I could name here the Romanian Commercial Bank or the Dacia Renault Foundation. They were quite open to this idea from the very beginning, and most of the actions that we managed to do were possible because of the support. However, it is not something, such a program cannot be funded exclusively from corporate social responsibility budgets. The Romanian government needs to invest, and the investment has to be very large and long term. And without that, sooner or later, other players in the world will be able to spread their points of view and their worldviews in this territory, and the consequences might be unfavorable for our democratic system. So, as a conclusion, I would like to remind everyone that you cannot have a proper democracy without a modern educational system that offers attractive education to children. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Professor, for stressing this very important element, education as a core, let's say, link between the digital transformation, the artificial intelligence, and the democratic resilience. So again, thank you for expanding the discussion even further. And I'm hoping the same will happen with our final speaker of the day, Mr. Sebastian Dan Naste, who follows EU regulation related to privacy and data protection, as well as national legislative development covering the digital economy, and with a focus on Ireland and Romania. So he is present today on behalf of CON International, and Mr. Naste, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction, and thank you very much for the DNSA for their invitation. Actually, I'm here in my personal capacity, but a few words about CON International. We are an independent regulatory intelligence provider, so today I will have to be neutral and impartial as the company is. And moving on to the topic of today, I would like to talk a little bit more about disinformation and privacy and data protection, and to find the link there. I think that disinformation is such a spread phenomenon that is very difficult to find a single definition which is accepted by all stakeholders. However, doing my homework for this presentation, I found a very interesting presentation from a spy chief, 3-star general in the Securitatea, which was the secret police of the Communist Party in Romania. And he defined this information as dissemination in the press or on the radio back then of false reports intended to mislead public opinion. However, we could also define this information as sending or promoting fabricated information to population with a clear intention to mislead. And equally, the European Commission defines this information, but this time on online platforms like social media or video sharing platforms, or even on search engines, as verifiable false or misleading information which is created, presented, and disseminated for economic gain or intentionally deceive the public, which may cause public harm. And it's very interesting to see how the EU Commission sees this public harm. And in its opinion, public harm would cover threats to democratic, threats to political, threats to policy-making process, but also threats to the public goods, such as the protection of the citizens' health and security. However, in my opinion, disinformation should not be put in the same bucket with illegal content. For example, incitement to hatred or violence, child sexual abuse material, or even terrorist content, or intellectual property rights infringements. But in your opinion, why disinformation works? Why there is a win for disinformation? I found a few reasons why. Lack of literacy, lack of education, as my co-speaker said. Maybe also an increase of internet and social media network usage by the population, and also on the clustering algorithms behind the social media. Change how business is done. Now the majority of the business is done online without fact-checking. Actually, you You can search online for something, and then we don't have time anymore. We don't have time to think. We read an article, and then we said, okay, that's it. It's an article published online. We don't go to fact-checking. Maybe some of us would go to try to identify the source of that article to see if what the original author said. Another reason would be getting information from within one community. And that's because of the lack of human interaction within communities and the lack of dialogue, the lack of communication, and this lack of human interaction between people would lead and would make this information to work. But however, we are in the fourth wave or the fifth wave or the sixth wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And there is a high risk that disinformation to compromise public health and the responses in place, which were put in place by government health authorities, but I would not insist very much on that. However, I've seen in a very interesting report from the European Commission. They report every year on non-food dangerous consumption products, and what they detected in 2020, they removed from the EU market these non-food dangerous consumption products. They removed from the EU market, and they saw an increase in percentage of 83% of dangerous products. Maybe you might think why, because out of this increase, 9% of all dangerous products, they were related to the COVID-19, and they were related to the pandemic, like ineffective face masks, toxic disinfectants, or UV lamps, which were not working as disinfection systems. And why was that? Because this information and fake news influenced a lot the consumer behavior. Maybe you also received on your WhatsApp groups some stories in Romanian, which were translating actually other stories in Spanish or in German, saying that some doctors would not recommend some medication or would recommend some medication for the pandemic. However, I think that this is only the tip of the iceberg if we consider the confusion and the harm produced on global scale by the number of news or announcements on social media on promoting the use of certain drugs, as I said before, or substances which would be effective or non-effective to the COVID-19 pandemic. And what's actually notable is that these disinformation campaigns, they got an active support from highly relevant influencers, which are there. They have a very high online presence. However, when we are talking about effective campaigns, people must be targeted and convinced about something, such as voting with a specific political party, or trusting someone, or sharing some information about the product or service. That's why disinformation can take many forms, including the use of manipulated images or videos, as I said before with that recording that was circulating on WhatsApp, even digital engineering attacks or social proofing. However, which could be the link between digitalization, disinformation, and personal data? It's very interesting how about 10 years ago, targeting or convincing people about something was a little bit different than nowadays. It required a well put in place strategy. It required people on the ground to track and understand what other people think. It required an infrastructure to shape an opinion. I remember that I got an invitation around 10 years ago to participate in a hotel lobby at the presentation of a product and to become all of a sudden the main investor of that product. Of course, it was a scam, but it targeted me because of word of mouth. Nowadays, the internet changed the game of play, and there are multiple tools available for the stakeholders. There are much more communication channels available. The organizations can now target people very accurate based on their digital behavior and based on their personal data. we all heard about the General Data Protection Regulation and the protection that this regulation should offer on the personal data. I will not insist now what personal data is. However, our political belief or political people opinion is protected by this General Data Protection Regulation as a sensitive data. What does it mean? The regulation offers a higher threshold of protection to such data, which includes data revealing people's political opinions. The general rule is that an organization should not process this sensitive data. So an organization should not process our political opinion. However, there are some exceptions in the regulation, and such data could be processed only if a person would give his or her explicit consent, or if the processing would be necessary for reasons of public interest, which are determined either by the EU or by the national law. In other words, we need to give our consent, basically. Let's say it's only one of the exceptions, right? But how do we need to give this consent? Only ticking a box, you think? Or sometimes we might not even understand what would happen with the data. Sometimes we might lose control of our personal data. However, an explicit consent required by the regulation, it implies a higher threshold than a statement or affirmative action. And for example, such an explicit consent could be given in a written form, or signing digitally a document, or signing a specific form on paper. Other guidelines, other EU non-binding guidelines suggest that such consent could be given by filling a form or sending an email, or as I said, using an electronic signature. So basically, the exception is to process such data on the political belief, not the rule. However, are there any guidelines at EU level on how to target users on social media? Yes, there are, and such guidelines are really recent. They were published in April 2021 by the so-called organism European Data Protection Board, where all the data protection authorities meet and discuss and debate various issues. And they try to clarify a little bit the responsibilities between social media platforms, between targeters. And who are the targeters? Targeters are natural or legal persons, like advertisers, who are sending specific messages to users of social media, and of course other actors involved in this process. And what's interesting that this EU body, the European Data Protection Board, found that the significant risks for the social media users when their data are used in targeted mechanisms are the loss of control, because they don't have the control anymore when they clicked, okay, I agree with how my data is processed. And it could be that they lose control of the data because it's also processed for other purposes. So let's say that a platform or an organization would take our data for one reason, and that organization would use this data for other reasons. Other significant risks identified by this EU body were cases of discrimination, manipulation, political influencing, or even the exclusion of data subjects. So for example, when a person would go to a bank, that bank might know that that person would have a preferred political party. That person, the credit of that person might be rejected or accepted, also based on their political beliefs. We know that social media platforms, for example, they gather a massive amount of data, right? Linked with our behavior, linked with our interactions. And what's very interesting, they also gather data of non-registered users. So we are registered users on a platform, but if we have a friend who is not registered on the platform, a social media provider would create by default a profile to that person, and would try to make some identify some data of that person, like his or her name, religion, political affiliation, or etc. And how it's done? Maybe they watch a video online, or they like a video, or they appear in a photo with an influencer who is very actively in this area. I will not insist anymore on the GDPR. I would only talk a little bit about some targeting possibilities. For example, there are different targeting opportunities, and one would be the custom targeting. What does it mean? Custom targeting is possible when it's based on the data that the targeter would have. So for example, in this case, an organization already has the personal data of some individuals, like email address or phone number or name. Then the company would ask a social media platform or a social media provider to compare this data against their personal data, what they have on their platform, forming in this way kind of a cluster of persons to which that kind of advertisement, could be political or non-political, will be displayed on the social media platform. We also have geo-targeting, and geo-targeting, for example, allows a company or an organization to target individuals based on their location. Maybe you use some applications for driving or for share riding, and then when you stop to wait in traffic, maybe an ad, a pop-out ad would appear on your phone with some organization or company, and that's because it is using geo-targeting services. There is also targeting based on online monitoring of behavior, because, as I said, social media platforms, they can also monitor our behavior, they can monitor what we do on the social media platform, and they can also monitor what we do on third-party websites through various tracking technologies that they have in place, such as cookies, such as social media plugins, or some new tracking pixels. For example, when a user would go to search online for a product, and then out of the sudden the product would pop out on the user's page, or a user is trying to identify some miraculous cure for the COVID-19 pandemic or for the virus, and then out of the sudden it will start to receive spam from some companies selling him medicine or whatever. As I said, the extensive monitoring of behavior might lead to profiling and automated decision making, because monitoring users' behavior both on and off the social media platform for extended periods would allow a social media platform or even an advertiser to infer the information regarding the interests and other characteristics of the user of the social media. I will give you an example. When a person would like various posts of a museum on social media platform, the social media platform would infer that the person is interested in art or culture. For example, when the social media platform would then develop a targeting criterion, enabling museums to target persons interested in paintings or interested in arts or culture. It's the same as with people who would be in a community which are anti-vaxxers, or is the same with the community, as my other co-speaker said, which are part of a massive influence behind the political leader. So this could happen. You could be interested either in art or politics or whatever. And profiling means that an automated processing of personal data which would aim to evaluate personal aspects, in particular to analyze or make predictions about individuals. Some organizations might use this monitoring behavior to advertise, and that would have a significant effect on persons. I would stop here. I will stick to my neutral position, and I cannot propose any solutions. But I think that personal data and protecting our data would be a good tool also to fight with disinformation and to make our society more resilient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naste. And again, I think this was a really good point, making the link between the pandemic and disinformation and the so-called infodemic, which was highlighted by the World Health Organization and others as doubling the COVID-19 pandemic with very serious and harmful effects on human health. So I guess this is a really good point worth remembering, especially since we do have some countries with low rates of vaccinations, and some link these low rates of vaccination with the ongoing infodemic regarding the virus or the vaccination process. With that being said, I thank you all for your very complimentary presentations, and now we will move on to the Q&A section. I know we're a bit behind schedule, so Mihai, how do you want to do this? Maybe you suggested.
Let's see if there are any questions from the hall.
From the audience.
Yeah, it seems that we have no questions.
We were clear.
Yeah, we were clear. Actually, I have a question for Mr. Bologa. Mr. Bologa, you talked about education, and especially digital education and the future of education in general, and I agree with you in most of the points, but when we talk about common user, for instance, users that are usually connected to the internet are not part of the education system. And they have a certain age, like our parents, our grandparents. They still use gadgets connected to the internet, and they don't have the proper skill set to see how to protect themselves online. What can we do with the common user? How can we educate? How can we boost his knowledge faster in this period?
No, thank you very much for the question. So this is a situation where we have to use short-term solutions such as fake news detection and other instruments which are efficient and can prevent this social group from being targeted by various players. However, even the older generation is in a constant contact with the younger ones. They have nephews, they have sons, and the problem that we are facing now is that the younger generation is exposed to an educational system that is not attractive to them. If you look at what is happening when they have the chance, they always connect to social networks. So instead of listening to their teacher that is explaining to them the importance of the democratical system, there are such lessons, I think, in the 7th grade or so. Most children would gladly connect to YouTube and watch YouTube shorts and various other influencers. So that's the main problem, because children would rather consume social media content instead of consuming the school curriculum. And this is not the fault of the children. That's the problem of those who are creating this curriculum, which is not modern, and it is based on printed books or PDFs that are printable, and that has to change, because in my opinion, if this does not change, a new generation will be lost, and if we lose a new generation, our democracy will become more vulnerable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bologa. Any other questions from the room?
Can I perhaps add something
Please.
to what Mr. Bologa was saying?
Please, until we have the microphone.
I will not disagree with children's consumption patterns, but I will say that the problem with adults is, I think, actually much more nuanced. One, just like many other European countries, we actually have a problem of loneliness among the elderly and not only. That's been aggravated by COVID, of course. More people have been staying at home, human contact has been reduced, but this was a problem before. So what we have in the world of adults is that there are very few, as I was pointing out in my presentation, sources of authoritative communication. If you go to the small urban areas or the rural areas, the only sources of communication that people actually have access to are the church, where they meet on Sundays, and their neighbors and people they meet at the marketplace. Nobody from among the local authorities comes to speak to them. Political parties have actually disengaged from their electorates. That's one of the elements that has secured the victory of the Alliance for the Unity of Romanians, our party, in the previous elections. The fact that they did a lot of mobilization on social media, but at the same time, while all other parties were campaigning on television, they took a bus and they crisscrossed the country and spoke to people directly. So the thing is, even with the vaccination campaign, for instance, we missed the opportunity of having GPs, so the so-called family doctors, reach out to their patients first and speak to them from the position of someone that these people know and trust more than the medical system in general. And so the first ones they had access to was influencers online, on TV, and their neighbors. So essentially, there aren't many informed voices that can speak to adults, and what happens, and the same is true in the bigger cities. Let's not forget that Romania had huge emigration rates, so now there are a lot of rather elderly people who are living without direct access to their children or grandchildren, and you know, the amount of time that they spend talking to them on Skype or on the phone or on WhatsApp cannot be a match for the hours they spend in front of the TV or in front of social media, which is their own source of community, if you wish. So let's not be surprised that preposterous views are formed on social media or alone sitting at home, because people end up feeling the need for human contact. And if at some point they feel that a certain TV channel or talk show speaks to them, especially on an emotional level, they will connect to that rather than connecting to the actual rational, informed truth. So I do believe that we are in dire need of, on the one hand, a much, much better education system for our children. And I think this is one of the worst things that's happened in Romania over the past decades, the state of public education. But at the same time, we need campaigns that target adults, and we need to try and reform communities, because otherwise these are the people who are going to vote and influence the direction of our countries in the next few years, way before our children come of age and end up voting themselves, and hopefully do it in a better way than we are doing it today.
Thank you. Please.
So for the Professor Bologa and the ladies, question about, first it's about education. I fully agree with your statement that our learning system is outdated. However, in a matter of replacing, my question is, do you have an initiative to draft something to replace the current educational system, to try to convince the political class to replace with something that should be solid, should be validated? And with the ladies, considering what you mentioned about propaganda, it's a matter also of education, because it's easy to kind of put something in the people's mind where it's lacking of education. So it's still about the last maybe 20 years of education that the education system was the one of the worst time considering the political support. And in the computer science and nowadays devices, we have the zero trust technology more and more. So the people also maybe have to have the zero trust in what they are reading, in what they are hearing, and to question. And as Mr. Naste says, not just to read an article over the internet, but to ask yourself what is going on. And this should be like an education-based. So my question about this is, are you working on these type of programs in order to educate the students to ask themselves about the readings, about the findings, and so on? Thank you.
Yeah, my answer is yes. There have been such proposals, both on an international level, also at a Romanian level. For instance, the OECD has proposed a system based on transferable microcredits, which would solve many of these problems. And that system can be used in Romania as well, so it is applicable here. And some universities actually are starting to explore the possibility of using transferable microcredits. There are no such discussions at the pre-university level where most of the problems are. Now, when we talk about fighting fake news among adults, there are only short-term solutions. So yes, we can organize campaigns, we can use fake news detection systems, we can try to build local communities and so on. However, what we are seeing now is the result of improper education that took place 20 or 30 years ago. And this is quite visible if you compare the vaccination rates from Romania with countries such as Portugal or Italy or whatever. You will see that there is a clear link between a clear connection and correlation between the level of education and the vaccination rates. We do have doctors in Romania which are not vaccinated, so we have general practitioners here which are not vaccinated, and not few of them. So this again raises questions on the efficiency of our educational system. So yes, we have to try to use the current institutions in order to prevent adults from consuming fake news. And probably the most efficient way is to prevent fake news getting to them, because once they get it on their smartphone, or it will be very difficult to reach to so many people and present another point of view. So both actions are necessary and both actions are welcome, and this is something that is not going to be easy to do.
Thank you for your question. Bogdan, if you take the floor with the questions from the chat, please.
Yeah. the messages which are usually brought to malign influence. But as Juana said, the main beneficiaries, unfortunately, are domestic actors, according to various studies. So I think this is very important to not only expose but also counter through positive messages, fact-based, and in order to win the hearts and minds of the citizens. So now making the transition to the online Q&A, we have a question here from let me see. Okay, from Mr. Duncan Pan, the director of the National Directorate. And it is a question addressed to all panelists, asking, what suggestions do you have towards starting or continuing an open and fair discussion with decision makers in order to address the concern that cybersecurity is just a cost and that cyber teams are just cost centers? So yeah, this is a tricky one because it involves policy recommendations for decision makers. So is anyone willing to answer the question for Mr. Campan?
Very, very briefly, I'm not a specialist in cybersecurity, but if we can replace this information in that concern that Mr. Campan shared, probably we'd have come up with the same thing. So I think that the short-term solution for the problems he is encountered is to educate very, very short-term, starting with Monday, the leadership about the change communication ecosystem in which they live. Divisive leadership, I think, is the main problem, because what the social media dwell in reaction and the reaction to reaction and creating a huge noise that really covers everything that is a matter of substance. So I don't think I'm in complete agreement with what has been said about the education system, about the need to invest in the education. I mean, we don't need to argue in favor of this. But again, this produces long-term results. And as Kane said it is a little bit cynical today. In the long term, we are all dead. We have to survive tomorrow and next week. And now I'm talking about survival in a very, very concrete term. So I think that we really have to start with leadership, with divisive rhetoric, and educating people in charge about how the new ecosystem functions.
If I may add something, look, I mean, to be honest, I think one thing is for sure, we're not going to be able to stop fake news, if you want to call it that, or propaganda, malign influence, cyber attacks altogether. The threat itself and the forms that it takes changes all the time. It's an evolving process precisely because the technology evolves. So you always have, if you look back 6 months from now, you're going to have new strategies, new tools available to carry out both cyber attacks and propaganda. Hence, the only solution that we have is that we have to stay in permanent consultation, all of us who are meaningfully working in this field. And whether it's cyber or disinformation, and these two areas do have parts where they overlap. They also are quite different in various other respects. But those who work both on cybersecurity and on preventing and limiting the impact of propaganda and malign influence, whether we're talking state institutions, civil society, private sector, as I was saying, I think we need to stay in permanent consultation. We have started such a working group at the Global Focus Center. Some of you have participated already, and Mr. Duncan Pan also, I think if he didn't participate in person, he did delegate someone. And we're going to continue doing it because we think the value is simply in the engagement. We are really lacking this, at least in Romania. There's a lot of mistrust between government authorities and civil society. Each of us believes the other is out to actually block us from the public debate or marginalize our voice. We are mistrustful of each other in how competent or well-meaning we are. And this is one of the main vulnerabilities that's exploited, paradoxically, both by cyber attackers and by propagandists. So we need to start fixing this first. And we cannot just declare it fixed after a certain amount of time. We have to keep up the cooperation simply because what we are dealing with now is not the same thing that we're going to be dealing with 1 year from now. And this is costly. It is it's complicated. It involves budget. It involves time. I agree with that. I think it's hard for decision makers to understand an open-ended process. We very often get the response, "Oh, come on! I mean, come up with more workable recommendations. We're not going to fix democracy now, or we're not going to fix governance now." But seriously, this is a problem that's generated by bad governance and by the lack of democratic resilience. So unless we fix these, unless we at least start, we're never going to get to the end of the road. And I think we don't just need media literacy, we need democratic literacy, democratic education, again, because we're not going to stop fake news from reaching people. No matter how hard we try, we can limit it, but we're not going to stop it. So people need to have the critical thinking training and the democratic values training to be able, when the news reaches them, to at least as much as they can make the difference between what is true and what is false, what is right and what is wrong, go back to science, trust the science, and so on and so forth. So yeah, all I can say is I think all of us here are open to this process of consultation, but that's pretty much all we can do about it.
If I may to intervene, I will be very brief. I was reading last week a report that by investing around 1 leu, around 20 cents, into education would bring back to society around 8 lei or 1.60 euros. I think that's a lot, and I think that this investment in education, in the general education, because if you have an educated population, then you have a strong democracy. Then you have a resilient society, and that can be shown in the presence of elections. When we go out to vote, that the people would understand the mechanism of democracy. And I think that education is important. Education is important in privacy and data protection, right? Why should I care? I didn't steal anything. I'm not a thief. Yes, you should care, because at once in our life we would like to hide someone from the society. For example, I would not like anyone or everyone to know that I'm here speaking at this conference, or I would not like everyone to know that I'm going to have a coffee with Mr. X after this conference, right? So I have something to hide, but to be protected and to understand the legislation, I needed the education that I was provided, and I was lucky because I got education also here in Romania, but also outside, and education also in cybersecurity. We have the cybersecurity month, right? It's a very nice initiative that certCON is organizing it here in Romania and NISA at EU level, and I think that is important for us to be engaged with such mechanisms, and of course more mechanisms which would be available to the general population would be more than welcome, because I'm thinking now about my friends. I have one of my good friends. He's a doctor, and he showed me a YouTube video with other doctors that didn't exist, that they said that the pandemic it's some fake news. And he's doctor, and he studied for that diploma. He studied a lot, and he spent a lot of energy. So what we lack some resources for our society to make it curious, to put ourselves more questions. Is this genuine? Is this coming from the author, directly from the author? Is it cited? Or to be, I would say, more education and to be curious in whatever field, cybersecurity, disinformation, privacy, or data protection. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for all your presentations. As I said, complimentary and very thought-provoking. Since we are already past due with the panel time, please allow me to thank all the distinguished panelists, our audience in person, and audience quite significant audience online, and. I guess this is maybe one final conclusion on my behalf. Indeed, as our speakers have repeatedly stressed, in order to tackle disinformation, safeguard democracy, we need the whole of the state, whole of the society approach, because these are very complex phenomenon. And regarding disinformation, just like in the world of cybersecurity and antiviruses, we constantly need to update our virus definitions because attackers will continue to do that as well. So with that being said, Mihai, you have the floor for the final word of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you to all the speakers. Thank you for coming. I'm sure that you could talk for hours about this topic, but we only had 1 hour and a half. Now I invite you for a short coffee break. Thank you.
On the pop-up window, there was personal information being shown. One of that was my debit card information. After I got hacked, the steps I took were immediate. I changed my password. I contacted the service providers. I did change my debit card. It is reassuring to have a new debit card which is more safe and more secure. And I also set up a new Wi-Fi system so that the default password and the name can be changed. You shouldn't share your devices with other people. I did change my debit card. It is reassuring to have a new debit card which is more safe and more secure. I would consider myself reasonably knowledgeable when it comes to technology, but after I got hacked, my takeaways are that you shouldn't share your devices with other people. Think before you click. If you get a suspicious looking message, look at the source and contact the service providers. You should always download official apps from certified application store and change your passwords regularly and change your Wi-Fi name as well.
My business has been running online for 8 years. Social media would be a huge part of our business. I got an email through from my social media provider and it was giving me an option to verify my account. So I clicked in, logged into my account. Within the next half an hour, my phone started to slow down. I noticed that apps that I would normally use weren't working. So I did turn the phone off. I turned my phone back on about 40 minutes later. There was a whole lot of emails that had just come in. When I opened it, I could see that all of my account details had been changed, my username, my password, and my phone number. We then had emails stating that our account had been taken for ransom. They were threatening to delete all of the content, to take the name if we did not respond and pay a ransom within 2 hours. That then whittled down to 1 hour. We realized we were on a countdown, and that's when we started to panic. I realized very quickly, don't interact. We'd had emails stating that our account had been taken for ransom. They were threatening to delete all of the content, to take the name if we did not respond and pay a ransom within 2 hours. The ransom they were asking for was $900. At the time, I very much considered paying it. But at the same time, my husband was looking online and was reading a couple of scenarios where this had happened to somebody else, they paid it and they didn't receive their account back. So I realised very quickly, don't interact. It was devastating to see our account disappear. Not only was that 8 years of work, but it was also the history of our business. We created the new account and then I went on to my personal account and I recorded a 2-minute video, very briefly telling people what had happened. When I woke up the next morning, that video had been viewed 25,000 times and everybody shared the page. Within 24 hours, we had built up a following of over 25,000. It was like somebody came in, burnt out my business, and then the community came together and built it up the next day. It was absolutely incredible. The advice I would give to people is always think before you click, no matter how legitimate something looks. It was devastating to see our account disappear. Not only was that 8 years of work, but it was also the history of our business. I was aware that hacking was becoming more and more prominent. I didn't expect that it would happen to me. The advice I would give to people is always think before you click. No matter how legitimate something looks, make sure that you click on the sender email. I would also say make sure that you put 2-step authentication on everything. Make sure to use a unique and strong password for each account. Keep them different and use a password manager where you can. As well as reporting to your social media provider or wherever the hacking incident has occurred, you should also report it to the local authorities, because the more these things are reported and the more awareness that is out there of what is happening, the more education is going to be put in place on how to prevent it.
Verificați cu atenție orice propunere de plată online. Nu accesați linkuri trimise de necunoscuți. Nu furnizați datele de pe card. Ele nu se folosesc pentru a primi bani. Raportați orice tentativă de fraudă.
Bună ziua! Sabin, mă auzi?
Bună, Ștefan, mă auzi?
Te aud, sper că mă auzi și tu.
Încă 2-3 minute ca să prelungi puțin primul panel și sunt la o cafea, intrăm imediat.
Asta voiam să întreb. Dai startul când începem?
5 minute.
Ok, eu sunt pregătit. Bine.
Ok.
Mulțumesc.
I gave my device to a friend I thought I could trust. And the next day, when I opened up my laptop, romantic music started playing and a pop-up window appeared. It was offering me a cheap upgrade for a service I regularly use. On the pop-up window, there was personal information being shown. One of that was my debit card information, which was frightening to even imagine that someone had access to my debit card information. I was thinking this is something suspicious, so I was gonna close the pop-up window, but it didn't allow me to close the pop-up window. And that was the moment I knew I got hacked. After I got hacked, the steps I took were immediate. There was personal information being shown. One of that was my debit card information. After I got hacked, the steps I took were immediate. I changed my password. I contacted the service providers. I did change my debit card. It is reassuring to have a new debit card which is more safe and more secure. And I also set up a new Wi-Fi system so that the default password and the name can be changed. You shouldn't share your devices with other people. I did change my debit card. It is reassuring to have a new debit card which is more safe and more secure. I would consider myself reasonably knowledgeable when it comes to technology, but after I got hacked, my takeaways are that you shouldn't share your devices with other people. Think before you click. If you get a suspicious looking message, look at the source and contact the service providers. You should always download official apps from certified application store and change your passwords regularly and change your Wi-Fi name as well.
My business has been running online for 8 years. Social media would be a huge part of our business. I got an email through from my social media provider, and it was giving me an option to verify my account. So I clicked in, logged into my account. Within the next half an hour, my phone started to slow down. I noticed that apps that I would normally use weren't working. So I did turn the phone off. I turned my phone back on about 40 minutes later. There was a whole lot of emails that had just come in. When I opened it, I could see that all of
Please,
my account
Stefan,
details had
we
been
are
changed.
ready.
My
You have the
username.
floor.
The 11th edition of the CERT Romania conference, CERTRO. I'm proud to be the host of the last panel on the second day. My name is Stefan Tănase. I'm part of the DNSC team here in Romania. I'm a security researcher with having been involved in a lot of incidents and a lot of research projects throughout the years. Just to make a quick introduction, the main theme of this panel is basically the pandemic and how attacks and attackers have evolved during the pandemic times. And we've been living for almost 2 years now in a worldwide pandemic that has undoubtedly made people reevaluate the way that they live their lives. It has made companies and generally organizations reevaluate how work is being organized, and even events such as this one are now happening in a different format because we need to accommodate the new rules of society. So as the fabric itself of the society has been changing, cyber criminals and generally attackers are of course always very quick to adapt and always trying to find new opportunities in how they can achieve better efficiency of their attacks. So the question is if ourselves, the defenders, are also capable of following this trend, and if we are managing to stop these new attacks and trying to become better and always stay one step ahead of the cyber criminals. So during today's panel, we have 6 speakers, both from the private sector, but also from academia. We have Ioan Constantin from Orange Romania, Mihai Sari from Trend Micro, Valentin Nicoara, who is from certCON, Dr. Samuel Fricker, professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Switzerland, Bogdan Botezatu, Director of Threat Research at Bitdefender, and last but not least, Lucian Nițescu from Bit Sentinel. So without taking too much time by myself, I would like to give the floor to Ioan Constantin, and let's see what he has to present. Ioan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. I'd like to thank our guests, our hosts for the invitation. It's always a pleasure and it's always an honor to be in such great company. I'm going to jump right in the subject for today, and as Stefan was undoubtedly mentioning before, the key topic here is the adaptation to this new normal, to this new and extremely challenging situation of remote everything and remote friendly everything. I have prepared a few slides for you guys. I'm going to share. Just please confirm that you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen, Ioan, and we can hear you well. Just one last thing I forgot to mention. We need to make sure that we all fit in the scheduled time, and we're already a little bit late. So from an organizational perspective, I think we should keep the presentations to 10-15 minutes max, just to give all speakers equal chances to present their ideas. So thank you so much, and feel free to ask questions and put them in the chat. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that. Ioan, the floor is yours.
I'll do my best to have a good focus and finish in 10 minutes or so. I want to discuss a few of the lessons that we learned in the new normal. I've highlighted here new normal because it has started as a somewhat scary buzzword, but is now actually a reality. So I guess that next time we are going to meet, the word new is not going to be present in at least not in my slides, not in my deck. So it's pretty much what we've learned in order to adapt to this new normality of remote-friendly everything, and this new way of federating and distributing all the, or at least most of the resources we use each day in order to conduct our business. There are a few challenges arising from the rapid the rapid adaptation needs to this pandemic world, and of course, foremost is the rapid transition to digital. We had to change a lot of processes, a lot of ways of doing things that were mostly offline and mostly convoluted in some form of bureaucracy, and we had to transition this to digital. And before I continue, I'd like to clarify that we, as a whole, I'm talking about the Romanian business, the Romanian enterprise, the SMEs, the public institutions, and of course the users, the networks users and internet users at large. So this rapid transition to digital, of course, brought some challenges. We had to adapt cybersecurity to new needs, to new perimeters, to new softwares, to new processes, of course, and this led to a rise in threats in both volume and complexity. Because as we move from a somewhat well-defined environment in enterprise, in the enterprise at least, and we extend that environment, we somehow blur the borders, and we adapt our services, our platforms, the way we manage information, either we store it or either in store or in transit. We of course have to add a top of the existing frameworks and technologies, and this is a good leverage for threat actors. There are some trends that we have gathered from our MSP offering. It's Business Internet Security is an MSP service that Orange Romania offers to its B2B customers, and it is a service of scale. So we have data, and we offer protection. We offer preventive and reactive protection to SMEs and large enterprises, as well as public institutions. So this is some of the trends that we gathered from, I guess it was November 2020 until just recently at the end of September 2021. We see, of course, a rise in phishing attacks, and I guess it's at least 20% year over year as compared to the previous period. Of course, the star player, the key player, the ransomware, it's been going strong this year, unfortunately, and the obvious botnet activity, this hasn't necessarily changed, but the threat actors are adapting some of their botnets, some of their CTC methods, and the methods of actually adding zombies to the botnets in order to be a bit more scalable when it comes to VPN and when it comes to out-of-band management of the zombies. DDoS is still present. Of course, we're not going to get rid of DDoS anytime soon, but it has overall scaled down a bit. So threat actors are not necessarily interested in investing in large-scale DDoS attacks, because the targets have been federated and the targets have been actually spread to a much wider area now with remote work and remote everything. We can furthermore discuss on the distribution by business vertical. And again, this is out of the total of our business internet security customers during the same time frame. We can see that the retail businesses that are protected by our MSPs have been hit by around 1/3 of all attacks, of all threats that have been monitored and blocked by business internet security, with the government and public institution coming second, then transportation, and transportation does include both large-scale parcel services and door-to-door services, and businesses in the on-demand door-to-door services that have been gaining some ground in recent times because of the pandemic. The health and pharma sectors have been targets of nearly 15% of all the attacks, and this might seem like a bad sign, but it's actually an improvement over the previous period. So end of 2019 through the end of 2020, when the health sector was the primary target of most successful attacks. And we saw this in attacks targeting hospitals and health centers. But now things are a bit more under control, and this might be due to all the efforts that have been made in the previous year in order to improve the resilience and the overall cybersecurity of the healthcare sector. And of course, energy at last with some 12% of the overall attacks. Going back to the lessons that we learned, I've narrowed down to 4 main topics, and this might be of interest to you, or at least I hope it is of interest to you. First, the supply chain is still vulnerable. The criminals that are targeting, for example, the healthcare sectors are to some extent relying on supply chain vulnerabilities, because they're in the healthcare sector, at least in the Romanian healthcare sector, there is a very it's a bit of a bad mix of technologies and platforms, and there's a lot of very old and unmaintained technology there, and there are a lot of subcontractors doing a lot of things. So the supply chain is one of the principal vulnerabilities when it comes, at least, to the healthcare sector. Second, the virtual workforces. Why we move to a more of a virtual embedded way of working, there is a lot of pressure when it comes to the traditional security measures that we have adopted and used until the start of the pandemic, such as endpoint protection or mobile devices management. There is a need to add some form of self-diagnosis and self-remediation towards the user. So we have to push essentially on awareness, on education, and on continuous learning for the end user in order to increase their abilities to recognize cyber attacks and cyber threats and to quickly act, because automation can only get us so far. And the need to secure platforms is more and more becoming evident that the lack of awareness on the user end is the principal vulnerability when it comes to virtual workforces. The third point is that cloud misconfigurations are still causing breaches, and I've stressed this point in, I guess it was certCON 10, so last year. Things unfortunately haven't yet changed, and we have, in the past 2 years, I've read a report that nearly 150 terabytes of data have been leaked from unsecured Elastic instances. And this is simply an example. We all love Elastic, we all use it, but we have to become a lot better at configuring and securing such instances. So cloud systems and cloud platforms are like a candy shop for attackers, for malicious actors. And the final lesson learned here is that infrastructure monitoring is essential. We have to enable more AI ops types of actually operating infrastructures. We have to heavily rely on machine learning and on artificial intelligence in order to better understand and to better monitor our infrastructures, especially when it comes to VPNs. So a push to AI ops adaptation might just offset some of the pressure that comes from this rapid transition to digital. There's some observables that I've added here. This is some of the things that we've noticed and we've documented through the past year. First, VPN. VPN is a technology that we are so heavily reliant on that it's becoming more of a day-to-day, more of a normal way of actually connecting to resources than an offset of usual enterprise connectivity, so such as it was before the pandemic. There's a Tenable report that says that there's been an increase of nearly 200% year over year of vulnerabilities across VPN technologies with CVSS ratings of 9.5 and higher. This is increasingly worrisome because for an attacker, from an attacker perspective, VPN is the promised land. You can go, you can actually, pivot and maybe move laterally in the enterprise environment, and there are lots of interesting things there. Or you can strictly target the VPN user, so the other end of the tunnel, and target the VPN user's information's datas. This we have to fix. This we have to update. This we have to monitor. This we have to pen test. This we have to red team, blue team, all the way until we can somehow rely on a efficient and safe profile for VPN connectivity. Phishing is of course on the rise. There's a rich land of lack of awareness here. The campaigns are broad and are becoming even broader. They target anything and everything from the classic email phishing and scams to social networks, IMS, and even dating apps. So I recently read that there are widespread phishing campaigns within dating apps. This is interesting. And of course, phishing as a vector enables ransomware. And ransomware has had quite a year. It is enabled by multiple vulnerabilities in all types of softwares. And unfortunately, it has regained the #1 position as a threat for consumer enterprises and the like. It has yet again gone global, and we have to push even further on awareness for the end users and for up-to-date and state-of-the-art protection against ransomware and against malware in general. There's a focus on 5G, as 5G is settling in and becoming the norm when it comes to connectivity. Attackers are becoming more interested in underlying technologies because the infrastructure are diverse and they scale very well and easily. And some of the infrastructures and some of the components are heavily reliant on open source software. And this is, of course, of interest to attackers. And the collaborative work, the video conferencing platforms, the shared virtual workspace spaces, even performance and evaluation platforms used by HR services are still prime targets for threat actors. It started in 2020. I'm sure you all remember there were some headlines in the international press that some suppliers of video conferencing and collaborative work softwares have been prime targets for attacks, and that some of those specific platforms are especially vulnerable to a worryingly large class of attacks. And things, of course, have improved by then. There are lots of patches in place. There's a more robust mindset when it comes to securing and updating such platforms, and they are becoming more centralized in the enterprise, at least. But there is still work to be done. Finally, I'm going to leave you with this slide. It's a basic toolkit, mostly for end users, mostly for consumers, not necessarily for enterprise users, not necessarily for businesses, but it's just your run-of-the-mill best practices guide on how to stay secure and safe online. This was it on my part. I guess I'm open to questions. I'm not sure on the format. Stefan can maybe clarify this. There's going to be a Q&A at the end, or should we take some cues right now?
Thank you so much, Iwan, for sharing some of your expertise. I know you guys in Orange are doing quite a lot of innovation and a lot of implementations of important security projects. So it's highly appreciated. I see there's no question at the moment, but if any questions arise until the end of the session, I'm going to make sure to put it. From my side, I would ask you one question based on how you've seen the pandemic developing throughout the past year. If you'd give only one piece of advice to the companies that you would work for, that piece of advice that would help them the most in facing the new threats, what would be this piece of advice? What's the most important thing that you see missing from organizations' cybersecurity practices at the moment? And that one thing that you would think would really improve their posture and minimize their attack surface.
Stefan, this is a great question, and I'm pretty sure that you already know the answer. This hadn't changed in the past 20 years or so. Awareness. You have to heavily invest in user awareness, a full life cycle of learning and continuous improvement for your employees.
I absolutely agree, and I think, as you mentioned during the presentation, it's even more important right now that everyone is working from home and everyone is their own administrator of their own, let's say, IT infrastructure. So thanks again, Iwan, for your input. And I would like to now invite Mihai Sari to take the stage. Mihai is a part of the in Romania. Really professional, has been active throughout the region. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for handing me the mic. I think you had some internet connection problem, so I will present myself again. So my name is Mihai Sari. I work as a sales engineer for a local team, Trend Micro. So, again, thank you very much for inviting us to this very nice event. It's a pleasure for us to be here, and also, although it's still a hybrid, I think we all enjoyed the feeling, meeting each other after almost 2 years. Okay, so let me check if this pointer works. Okay, good. So, my talk today will be a very short one and about vulnerabilities. We saw on Ioan's presentation that the first column on observation that they saw 180% growth year over year on vulnerabilities 9.5 and above. Yeah, this means that basically are very critical and needs to be taken care of. So, since we are in a technical session today, and of course I have only 10 minutes, I had to be very, very careful when I'm constructing my slides. These are my slides, so this is not necessarily company material, so I did my own research. And I had to, actually with my colleagues, we were discussing, and I had to bring up 6 vulnerabilities that could fit very nice in one slide. Of course, I couldn't pick only 6. It was very tough. And these ones, the ones that you can see now in my slides, are the one, from my opinion, the most important in the last year. Yeah? So, I think we can all remember the zero logon, yeah, the Active Directory of vulnerability that was actually crazy for those times, very easily to exploit. You can find in GitHub very easy, not one but a couple of working POCs. Yeah? And I was discussing with some CISOs back then, and they were, how to say, not afraid, but they had very tough moments going, explaining to the sysadmins, Windows sysadmins, that they need to patch, to apply this patch immediately. Yeah? We all know that it's not easy to actually act on the Active Directory, which is one of the most important systems in the network. This specific vulnerability was actually exploited by different threat actors. Most of them were going basically to the ransom part. Then we had, but actually before we had the SMB Ghost, again, very simply to exploit. So these ones actually are 6 exploitable. By exploitable, I mean vulnerabilities where you can easily find exploits to actually do the work. So SMB Ghost was another one, mostly affecting endpoints. Again, with a crafted packet, you can get remote access and do different things on the system. Of course, we had the one for VMware, another very serious one, where you can actually, by web unauthenticated, you can actually even encrypt some virtual disk on the virtual environment. These are local ones, but critical. Why? Because you cannot basically isolate them. You cannot go and deny the LDAP or NTLM logon, because of obvious reasons that you will deny yourself, your business. Another, this is on left, you see the icon local. Then we have the remote ones, yeah, the one that are actually exploitable from the entire internet. And the most present one and the most serious, I would say, and I think it was a very tough year for the exchange, the local exchange deployment. So we had, like, I think 1 per month, or even more than that. First of all, we had the proxy logon, yeah, very easily exploited with cross foundry request, CSFA. Then we had the proxy shell, yeah, I think didn't pass a couple of days, and we had another one. Then recently, I think in August, we had the proxy token, which was basically discovering by one of our independent researchers in Zero Logon. I will talk a little bit later about this. Again, I think we can all agree that it was very, very tough days for the sysadmins, you know, to go and patch immediately these vulnerabilities. Why? Because basically the email, it's one of the most important services that the IT departments are actually servicing. Okay, another one, actually I did some refresh on my slides, and this one I added yesterday about the Apache web server. Again, we had a couple of vulnerabilities linked. So linked on the same vulnerability, but with different ways of attack. And here, I think it's important, and it was interesting. Why? Because this, as we all know, Apache is an open source software, yeah? And since the attackers, the researcher, can have access to the source code, then for them it was very easily, when they actually release the patch, do a diff on the code, and they saw actually what function were modified, and they modified their exploit, and of course they get access immediately. So this is the reason that we actually see two linked vulnerabilities. Hopefully right now it's solved, but we will see in 1 month. Another interesting one was about some, I don't like to give vendor's name because I don't think this is very important, but we have a load balancer vendor with very, very tough, I would say, vulnerability. Why? Even it has the score 7.5, but again, you can easily find the exploit, and being public, exposed to the internet, you can use Shodan, for example. I did actually when I saw the vulnerabilities and they implemented in the Shodan search, I was able to basically do a search on Romanian local customers, one maybe not necessarily our customers, Trend's customer, but the people I know. And I was actually calling them, tell them, guys, you have a serious problem, go ahead and patch, and do some internal research because you might be already breached, yeah? And the attacker is maybe it's already in your network, and we had a case where in a couple of days they were encrypted, yeah, ransom, because as you see, this specific vulnerability was part of very serious APT groups. Okay, I said I had one slide, but I cannot limit in one slide. And in the last month, okay, maybe it's not the month, last month, but last month, we had this, they call it nightmare. Why? Because, again, they were coming in waves of vulnerability, very serious one. The first one was the printing nightmare. I remember an email, I think we had the quarter end, by our own IT department saying that they had to disable all the printer spoolers in all our systems. Why? Again, because there was no workaround and there was no patch from Microsoft. They actually did a couple of tries, but finally after 3 months they managed to fix the vulnerability. And the only solution was just disable, stop the printing spooler. And you can imagine how it was for the guys on reporting or guys from logistics, where they actually go ahead and print something because it's the nature of their job. Then we had a serious sum, another very, very tough one. Why? Because you can very easily go and actually read the sum from registry, or maybe going for the shadow copy of the system. And I think this one can actually go, and I can talk till the evening. But because the theme of this specific track and the whole event is this pandemic times, we have this new, as also Johan was saying, new challenge on the VPN systems. Why? Because these actually services were introduced lately. Yeah, I know a lot of companies that they were not even considering going with the business offsite, and overnight, yeah, they had to implement systems and keep the business going. And with this, of course, the attack surface, I remember Tudor's presentation from yesterday about the attack surface, the vector that the attackers could get in, increased. And this is, I'm not giving names. You may search for the CVE and see exactly what was the vendor name, but only this one was actually responsible for almost 1 million, I think, if we're going up to date, could go to 1 million vectors for ransomware attacks. And then I have this slide from Risk Sense, so we didn't do this slide. The idea behind this is that most of the vendors were affected, and most of the vendors had vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities were weaponized. I think this is the key takeaway. Okay, so you may ask, how come, or who are the guys actually finding, do the research on these vulnerabilities? And one of the answer for this question is our own zero-day initiative. Basically, maybe one of you are already working. I know that we have researchers in Romania that actually submitting vulnerabilities and, of course, waiting for some bounty out of it. And some words about this. So we have now more than 10,000 independent researchers that are working in this program. Basically what we do, we are funding this heavily, so we have lots of millions behind this project, and we basically have this pool of researchers that submits vulnerabilities to us. We have our own team that actually checks and do the validation of these vulnerabilities, and from here, okay, we pay some nice amount of money to the independent researcher. Then we go and do the legal part of disclosure to the vendors. Why? Because you can imagine that it's not easy going to Microsoft saying that, hey guys, I found a nice vulnerability, or to, I don't know, some other vendors, you know, I need something from you. They might say, what was your business there, you know, maybe they can put charges on you. So this is the reason that this kind of initiative, this kind of bug bounty exists. We do this for them, and in the meantime, of course, we benefit, and I will show you why. Again, so as you can see in the graph, we had more than 50% of the vulnerabilities worldwide discovered are part of this program, which is funded by our company. We were top reporter for Microsoft and Adobe, and we saw a huge growth on high critical vulnerabilities. These are some key takeaways. Again, we had the 10,000 researchers, but we have our own, of course, like every security company has. And we are proud to say that we are a really global company. And with black, you see the research centers. So we have across the continents, we have the biggest part of course, it's in US, with Canada being the center. Then we have also Europe with Munich, and the closest to us it's Prague. And we have some discussion now to extend, maybe in the future, maybe in Romania, we will see. And then, of course, Asia. Asia, it's, as you might all know, Trend Micro, it's a Japanese company, 30 years legacy, and it's coming from Japan. Okay, we saw the landscape. We saw how many problems, how many issues the IT guys are facing, and I found this actually on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I think it represents very well the 1 month in life of one IT system administrator trying actually to keep the system up. And this is looping. It's 1 month, then you have again and again and again. What we can do about it? Like every business process, it has to be a balance between process, technology, and people. I think we can all agree in that. You cannot have a successful vulnerability management program only if you have like a great technology. Why? Because if you lack people, like skilled people, or the processes, the things that those guys need to do are lacking, then of course you end up with no results. And for this, to actually, what is the purpose of the patch management? It's to actually broaden the vulnerability window. And for this, actually, Trend Micro, not only Trend Micro, but we put the word on a process, basically. We promoting heavily this virtual patching concept. And what we do, basically, when we have the signature, the virtual patch available, we provide this to our sensors, yeah? And from that moment on, you might, I'm not necessarily saying that you're 100% protected, but you have a fairly good protection. And just to be more visual, you can imagine that you are in a war, whatever, and you apply a bandage. But of course, at the end of the day, you have to go to the medic and put some stitches. Yeah, you stop the bleeding for a while, but the virtual patching is not actually covering you for all time. And since there is no silver bullet, yeah, this is my key takeaway, I will say, you need to apply this in different points, in different sensors. And since Trend Micro has a very broad portfolio, we have the cloud one, cloud actually covering hybrid environments. We have the Apex, which is doing the endpoints, and of course, the network part, yeah? You can see that all our products are with one. And then we have the centralized console where you actually do the detection and response. And then I will go for a small dig-in. Network. For network part, we have our own pure IPS. Yeah. Of course, the feeding, yeah, the threat intelligence comes from the ZDI, but also for threat intelligence. This is for the known and undisclosure vulnerabilities. But what about the unknown? Yeah? Here we have our own deep discovery family, where we do advanced detection and response on the network traffic. We do advanced analytics, monitoring across over 100 protocols, and also do some custom sandboxing in order to get the 0 day out of the traffic. On endpoint, of course, we have tons of technologies on endpoint. I don't know, coming from machine learning, XDR, yeah, buzzword these days, machine learning, analytics, but also, as you can see, I highlighted only the virtual patching part. But the most interesting one, and my favorite one, and is the data center protection. Yeah? The protection tailored, specified, created for the data center, for the servers. Yeah? Either we are talking about virtual, cloud, or physical ones. And why it's important to understand from our opinion that data center is special, because not all systems are equal. It's not like on the endpoints or on the mobiles. Yeah? All the systems are different. Different patch level, different applications running, different security zone. Yeah? So you have one in DMZ, you have one in the offline environment, then of course you have different weight of it. Of course we covered systems, legacy systems up from 2003 Windows, going for the most recent one, systems, either we are talking about Windows, Linux, Unix system, yeah? So we do basically all the flavors of operating system in the data center. And it is tailored, why? Because on each and every system, we have the agent actually doing a vulnerability scanning, checking the services, checking installed application, open ports, users, blah, blah, blah. So we have tons of checks that we do, and we create basically a policy tailored for that specific system. Yeah? So we don't have a generic one, says, okay, it's Windows 2008, then go ahead and apply 2000 virtual signatures. Yeah? And that's it. I hope I managed to stick in the 10 minutes. If you have questions, I am here either now or at the end of the session. I'll be more than glad to take it. Thank you.
Thank you, Miki, for a very thoughtful presentation on the vulnerability scene. I see one question from one of our guests. The question is, was the print nightmare finally fixed for OS from Windows 7 and before? So for older OSs, is print nightmare still a problem? This is a question from one of our guests.
Good question. To be honest, I don't exactly know, but I guess that if these systems are already out of support from the vendor, and I don't think they get any updates. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, and it's a real problem, especially in big organizations that are still lagging behind and updating their hardware. Whenever your software reaches end of life, nobody can help you, so you are on your own. But yeah, once again, thank you, Mihai, for your valuable input to today's conference. And I would like to jump to our next speaker, who is Valentin Necoară. He's the CTO of certCON. He's a seasoned professional with a lot of experience in vulnerability assessment and pen test activities. He's a fan of open source. So Valentin, the floor is yours, the mic is yours, and please try to keep it in 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stefan.
We can't hear you. At least I can't hear you. I don't know about the...
Can you hear me now?
I think your microphone might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Valentin Necoară. I'm CTO of certCON. And I was looking at the very interesting presentations that Ioan and sorry, I forgot the name had. We are not per se, let's say, vulnerability or security company. It's one of our business lines. We offer cybersecurity services. We are implementing cybersecurity software. And I will start with a small presentation about our contribution to this security posture that you have mentioned during these pandemic times. So let me try and present myself. Sorry about that. Okay, so can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay, let me enter to, I don't see where it goes, where it went. Okay, so I will start with a couple of words about us, who we are, for those of you who do not know us. Then talk a little bit about our trusted services, our defensive security posture, which could be used as an use case for any company, and of course our vision to help others to go digital and do this in a secure manner. So about us, we are a Romanian company. We have a lot of experience in PKI. We started as a PKI company. We are doing the cryptographic software. And of course, starting from there, we went to perform qualified trust services. Our cryptographic software can also handle security, like, I don't know, encryption, communication security, any kind of basically cryptography. But the main usage these days is related to this digital signature and digital everything. Like Ioan said earlier, a lot of companies went online. They are targeting, the attackers are targeting VPNs, are targeting users. We offer the means to, let's say, improve security over those kind of services, over VPNs, over communication, over data, and stuff like that. Our software also has the capability of dual use. So it's used already in some kind of military projects. And starting from this, let's say, cryptographic core, we are also able to provide electronic identity services and also physical identity services, and of course cybersecurity, but not at the let's say internet provider or service provider or cloud provider level, but instead a more focused on-demand services. Second. Most of the software that we are using in this, let's say, security installation is built by us. So we have built our own software for managing digital certificates. We have built our own software for managing desktop security. We have a cloud solution, which is, we are the only company having such a solution, a Romanian solution, which performs remote electronic signature, leveraging online services and full security. And of course, a solution for user authentication based on the strongest method available to date. We are talking about FIDO, we are talking about digital signatures, and of course about blockchain. Now, we have new business challenges. I will not insist too much on this slide, but I will try to say a few words. So moving from the desktop approach, where you have an agent, we have inside software distribution, software patching, we have anti-malware, backup systems, we have perimeter controls, the IT network is secured at the border level, so it's a closed security model. We are going to a distributed security model where the user has multiple devices, has multiple OSs, and like Mr. Sari said, the number of threats increase with the number of the applications which are used by these users. So the enterprise must adapt to this new architecture, and of course the main focus is to protect information. So what do we need to protect from the attackers? We need to protect the email. So Exchange, of course, is one of the targeted systems. We need to protect the intranet resources. And here we have heard about the elastic leak, which means basically that all the logs regarding internal or external resources were accessible to unauthorized parties. We are talking about documents, remote access, here again the VPN. We can also take into account voice calls and messages if we have some confidential information which we do not need to be, let's say, publicly available. we are talking about data which is saved on the devices. Right now, we are talking about mobile phone, maybe some iPads, maybe some pictures. And also, we are talking about personal data right now, access to social networks, stuff like that. So we must protect our users sometimes, maybe even from themselves. So this may be achieved via some dedicated software, like Ioan said about enterprise mobility management solution, and of course by compliance and security policies which enforce, for instance, usage of PIN code, stuff like that on any device, a PIN code, I don't know, fingerprint, face recognition, anything. Okay, we are talking a little bit about our global security approach. So how we are seeing these things. So first of all is governance. We at certCON are audited against a couple of standards, a lot of standards actually, because we are doing, I think, at least 4 audits yearly regarding the operations in digital certificates and identity services. So policies, procedures, training, and security awareness is the cornerstone of this security approach. After we have this in place, we can talk about technology. So from our perspective and the perspective of a software company, of I don't know, let's say technology company, we are talking about testing, developing in a secure manner, testing the secure development and protection of the sensitive data or sensitive systems, which would mean also physical security, and maybe not everything could be placed on the cloud, and you need some offline systems, some which are reachable only through physical presence. This is a rather contradictory statement with this online, but there are special cases where this security defense must take into account also offline systems. And of course, the monitoring part, the monitoring and response, which would take into account the incident management, threat monitoring, response management. We are not a provider of solutions on this area. We are a consumer, basically. So we are using different solutions to achieve our goals, and I will go fast through our security posture. So first of all, we are talking about backup. Our usage of virtualization, and not only virtualization but offline system, make let's say conduct us to use backup solutions for hybrid architectures. So we need to backup virtual appliances, we need to backup physical machines. The backups some of the backups can be stored on cloud, others cannot be stored and must be stored locally or in the disaster recovery and stuff like that. We are talking about auditing. Auditing would mean everything, basically. So not only access and authentication, but also actions of the users. If we are talking about trusted systems, all the logs must be preserved. We are talking about privileged account monitoring. We are using various solutions. I've mentioned 2 here. If you have trusted roles, you would need to have such a solution. Hardware cryptographic security, HSMs, these are devices which are, let's say, characteristic to our line of work, or to the digital signature. But of course, they can be used not only by qualified trusted service provider, but also the users of digital signatures or even encryption, because they have huge cryptographic capability. One of the most important things after this is the update. So you must keep your system updated. If we are talking about 0 day, there is no protection if you are online. So everybody agrees that 0 day means that you are vulnerable for the respective vulnerability. But not applying system updates and critical security updates means that you leave the door open for everyone, basically, after the information has gone public. And there's no more the excuse of 0 day, but we are talking about just carelessness. So the system update is a critical part of the security approach. So if you need to be secure, you must update. And of course, from the cybersecurity perspective, we are talking about monitoring. So we have network monitoring, we have operational monitoring, where we are looking at the services, at applications, at system. We have security monitoring and audits, where we are logging security events, and I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 times a year, we run vulnerability assessments and penetration testing on our exposed over the internet systems. These are run with our inside cybersecurity, and yearly or twice a year, depending on the system, we are running these tests and vulnerability assessment with a distinct third party, independent third party, which is able to provide us with a report to pass the audits in order to have the conformity with the directives, EU regulation, and EU standards. Okay, now we are going to the digital transformation part. So you have a company, maybe you have some of the
minutes left, just so you know.
I have only 3 slides, so
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to the digital transformation. Right now, some of the company will have some of the systems or services that I presented earlier related to security, but most of the processes are still offline, let's say on paper. The usage of digital signature is mostly done for, let's say, enough documents. But recent regulation and, of course, the pandemic context requires us to be more flexible in this part. And right now, we have, for instance, a complete electronic process of employment. Through video identification, practically the new employee will only get to the office when his physical presence is required. Other than that, everything can be performed online. And for the companies, this would mean a huge benefit in terms of speeding up processes, either employment or decision-making through various electronic flows. And of course, saving time, having all the information at hand, because in electronic form, you will find it very quickly. So we have this integration with of the user with some of our interfaces, which are secured, we monitored, and if let's say a user decides or a company decides to consume the services, we can offer all of the above services on top of our cloud services provided. And of course, we can integrate with the existing IT systems. We can either provide services or on-prem solutions. And of course, we are talking about auditing and security of the flows, end-to-end security through various encryption techniques. And of course, everything according to standards. We are not using any proprietary, let's say, custom encryptions or flows that would require afterwards special tools. Everything is according to standards. So that would be our, let's say, addition to this going secure into these pandemic times. Hope it was interesting. If there are any questions, I'll be here to answer. I'll give you back the mic, Stefan. Thank you.
Thank you also, Valentin, for sharing the expertise of certCON. I know you guys are an important player in the cybersecurity market. We're going to skip the questions, leave them for the end. And I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Samuel Fricker, who is going to talk to us about the Geiger project, part of the Horizon 2020. Samuel has asked me to share the slides myself, so I'm going to attempt to do that. And meanwhile, you have the mic, so good luck.
Yes, hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, very good. So while I'm waiting for my slides to become active, thank you very much for the very kind invitation to be here together with you. I'm here, as you see, in the middle of the Swiss mountains, together with the Romanian National Cybersecurity Directorate, as well as with Cluj IT, as well as a number of other consortium members of our Horizon 2020 project, which we call the Geiger project. My name is Samuel Fricker. I'm the coordinator of the project, and I will be glad to use the next 10 to 15 minutes to introduce you to what we're doing in this project and opportunities which we try to create for collaborating with Romanian SMEs, as well as work we're doing right now in collaborating and interoperating with the National Cybersecurity Directorate. Could we move on one slide? So the challenge that we're addressing is one which has become very, very important now, especially during these pandemic times. In Switzerland, for example, we have seen that a massive digitalization among SMEs. So every hairdresser now accepts credit cards, while before has not been accepting credit card, but instead they wanted paper cash, they wanted metallic cash, and they would not have done any transactions over the internet. This has changed radically. So almost all of the SMEs now, at least in a Swiss context, and the places I see in Europe now are accepting digital transactions. And it's not only there. They communicate with the customers through their internet, they do the accounting on the PC and then submit the tax reports on the internet. They have their online banking account. So everything has started to be done digitally and connected. Previous slide, please. So what you see here is on the photograph is a photograph of one of these hairdressers. She was also visiting us now here in the mountains, in the Swiss mountains, and telling us the story of what happened during the summer break with her. She got, many of you probably are recognizing this thing, is a flu bot attack. And the bad thing was the flu bot attack was actually successful. So it installed the malware, it scanned her address book, and you can imagine how worried that this lady was, that now all her customers would be infected. And customers in some way can find out that she was the reason to be infected. And this would have been disastrous for her business, at least that was her worry. So besides that, many other threats are upcoming, including ransomware and so on. We have the experts here in the audience. I don't need to tell you about these things. Now, the thing that I personally think is interesting is that these SMEs, these small companies, they may be small in size, but together they make up what I would call a critical infrastructure. This is 99% of all the companies that we have in Europe. And what we try to do with Geiger is we try to simplify cybersecurity in a way that it becomes useful and usable by these kinds of companies. Can you move on, please, to the next slide? Our project is called Geiger because of what you see here in the middle. By the way, this is the hairdresser that I was telling you before. In the middle, what you see is a Geiger counter. You remember maybe Chernobyl, at least the older people remember Chernobyl and how afraid that we have been for the atomic radiation cloud. And well, the problem is we humans, we cannot sense these risks and these dangers that are coming to us, but instead we need to have sensors that help us to detect it. And the metaphor that we're having is that we're taking this Geiger counter from the atomic world into the cybersecurity world in the context of these SMEs. So we want to give them a number, telling them if you push the scan button, that's your level of risk, or at least the estimated level of risk. And then explain them why that level in terms of key recommendations of what they personally should do in order to improve cybersecurity. And actions can be to install tooling with additional sensors. Actions can be to experience an attack with the help of a safe attack with the help of a cyber range. Can be educational modules. Can be whatever actually is relevant for that specific company. And as you know, the protection for a company depends very much on the structure of the company. Do I have employees or don't I? It depends on the type of business. Do I develop software or am I just a user of the software? Do I use cloud or do I just use smartphones and so on? So it needs to be highly personalized and adaptive. Next slide, please. So that's just a preview of what the UI will look like. Then for our hairdresser, you see in the middle the scan button, and on top of it the number, and at the bottom then the explanations that are going to be provided, which are then connected with the actions like installing a tool or like to engage in an educational experience. Next one, please. So who exactly are these SMEs that we're addressing? We're following here the taxonomy with the Digital SME Alliance, the European Digital SME Alliance. We're actually collaborating on them right now on this topic in further refining the understanding of who exactly the SMEs are from a cybersecurity perspective. And you see here to the left, the hairdresser type company who's just a user of cybersecurity, so a digitally dependent company. We call them dependent now because of the pandemic. They have digitalized their business. Then the digitally based ones who make business with software. Then the digital enablers who produce software or cybersecurity technologies, and last but not least, startups in that area. Next one, please. So no, one less. Yes. So I highlighted now in colors what Geiger is doing. So Geiger addresses these about 85% of the companies that are digitally dependent or digitally based, and wants to help them to get more to understand the risk, and wants to help them to get more secure. At the same time, we observe a fascinating amount of investment in cybersecurity and a fascinating stream of technologies that is coming out for detection, protection, and so on. We have heard AI and so on. It's a very promising area where lots of possible products and services are coming out. And what we try to do with Geiger, we want to be a platform for these SMEs and maybe also large-scale companies for delivering their cybersecurity solutions to these digitally dependent and digitally based companies. So what we're doing is we're working very, very hard to understand who these SMEs are on the left-hand side. what they need, how they think, what they bring, and wants to offer a platform which is connected with these SMEs and allows then any provider of technologies actually to be recommended then to the right ones. So in that sense, Geiger is a filter mechanism to be recommended with our own cyber security technology when you're such a technology provider to the right SMEs. Next one, please. Next one, please. So what are we doing right now in the Geiger project? We have a three-phase approach. Phase number one is we develop the technology. We are maturing right now in developing the platform. So it is a big pleasure for me personally to see that the platform is taking shape. And we started now early trials in using the platform and validating the overall approach. Phase two is about to start. So phase two will start in the transition from this year to the next year, where we will have in 3 use case country large scale, not large scale yet, but we'll have trials with external entities, so external SMEs as well as external technology providers. As you see here, Romania is one important country. One important country is also Switzerland, where I'm located right now. And one important country is also the Netherlands for these trials. And in each trial, we explore different strategies of how to reach these SMEs and motivate them to do something about their cybersecurity. Then during the next year, we are going to work on our exploitation plans, trying to make the platform sustainable. So accompanying with a business model as well as a governance structure, so that the platform that is being developed here is going to be attractive, as well as going to survive the project and hopefully being the next service to reach this new critical infrastructure. And this is my words, the SMEs. Next one, please. So how do we work? So in order to reach the SME, you see at the right-hand side, we offer apps for deployment on any kind of platforms. It can be Android, PC, it can be Android phones, iOS phones, it can be Mac PC, it can be PC-based infrastructure as well as Linux-based infrastructure. And the company owner can connect these instances of the Geiger indicator and get an understanding of what the risk level of the company is and where to act, where to improve cybersecurity, thanks to the scanning that can be initiated. On the other side, I mentioned before, we do not want to compete with this huge investment in cybersecurity, but instead we want to open up Geiger as a platform. And in order to do that, we are working on a Geiger API, which is expected to be described for the first time then in an online webinar in December or January. So in the coming months, and will allow them to have technology developers, technology providers with products and services that are meaningful for these SMEs to be connected to the indicator, maybe contribute also to the calculation of the indicator, and get recommended in the right moment to the right SME. And since we're only offering the top recommendations to the end users, having a high chance then to eventually to be tried out, and if then meaningful from the perspective of the end user, actually also being used. The same thing we're doing with, and you see that on the bottom left, we're also doing with national certs, like for example the National Cybersecurity Directorate in Romania. In Switzerland, for the use cases, we're working together with the NCSC. And in the Netherlands, we're working together with the Digital Trust Center. Digital Trust Center because they are targeting SMEs. And as such, we are looking forward to information exchanges regarding IOCs, for example, in order to have a joint greater awareness of what is happening and engage in the right communication in order to raise awareness about upcoming threats, as well as assist these end users in mitigating these threats. Next one, please. Good. I think the time has advanced quite a lot. Let me move on. Next one, next one, and next one, next one. So what I would like to share with you is also a bit our plans and sharing with you the opportunities that we would like to offer and that we would like to welcome very much for collaborating with us, for trying out the Geiger platform and see what can be done, how do things exactly work, and so on. So right now we're on the left-hand side. We're somewhere in the middle of our project, and our project will be ended at the end of the next year, which you see on the right-hand side. We're entering very rapidly now the phase of where we're working with external entities. So we are going to, during spring, we're going to onboard 50 new SMEs and try out the platform together with them, try to learn, try to fine-tune and so on with them, as well as we start opening up the definition of our API with interested third-party SMEs as well as technology providers. Important is to know that this is by invitation. So maybe you want to approach the National Cybersecurity Directorate if you want, if you're interested in participating during that spring phase already, which is the alpha phase as we call it. Or alternatively, you can also approach Cluj IT from Cluj, which is coordinating actually the trials in Romania for Geiger. Then the highlight of the whole project will be in summer, the beta launch party. At this time, we're going to have a local party in Romania as well, where SME associations are being present, where the directorate is present. Also, ENISA has given support for this launch party, underlying the importance of this activity. And we look forward very much also to work together with technology providers on a connectathon, trying to actively use together with our technologists the APIs, and then together with selected SMEs engage in use case scenarios on site together in 1 or 2 very interesting, intensive days. So we would look forward very much to welcoming you for that as well. And then afterwards, we're entering the open beta phase, where we invite up to 100,000 SMEs to join us and to try out the Geiger indicator, and maybe also get a recommendation for your services and tooling, if it makes sense, according to the priorities for that specific end user SME, and learn together with us of whether, how, and how exactly the things are working, and how we can work together in order to make Europe much more safer by addressing this large majority of companies that we have in the European economy. Next one. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. You have my contact information at the bottom right. As mentioned, you can also approach the National Cybersecurity Directorate in Romania, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. Thank you very much, Samuel. And I think the project that you're working on is really needed, especially because small and medium organizations are going to need help, and are already needing help in terms of cybersecurity because of usually lack of resources. So thank you once again. I hope that the organizers of the conference are going to share the slides if you agree with everyone. And I'm gonna pass the mic over to Mr. Bogdan Botezatu, and let's see the view from the Bitdefender side of things to the current threat. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'm here. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for joining this presentation. I was a little bit concerned about the fact that I was the 5th in line to present on a very tight cybersecurity topic, how things evolved in 2021 and 2022. But as I was joking with my colleague Mihai, it looks like we didn't overlap too much. We've had vulnerabilities, we've had digital trust, We had a little bit of phishing and consumer threats. Now, I think it's my turn to talk about the elephant in the room. Before we do that, a little bit of credentials. This is me. My name is Bogdan Botezatu. I have spent most of my adult life in cybersecurity. For the past 14 years, I have been working at Bitdefender as Director of Threat Research. My specialties are emerging malware and ransomware. And I've been building decryptors since 2016. So expect a little bit of expertise on the ransomware space. Before we discuss about ransomware and how it finally became that elephant in the room I mentioned before, I think a little bit of history is due. You know, ransomware is nothing new. It showed its effects a couple of years ago, but it has been 32 years in the making. That's no mistake, it's 32 years in the making. What started as, let's say, half joke, half the product of a delusional mind in 1989 has become one of the most important detractors to the global economy today. Ransomware was first spotted in 1989 at a conference where it was delivered on floppy disks, and the author was expecting money to be mailed in cash to a specific address. It has remained dormant for most of the 2 decades until it was finally unburied from the archive by a couple of very enterprising cybercriminal groups called CryptoLocker and CryptoWall. CryptoLocker was active in 2014 for about 3 months, and it started this business at the confluence of democratized access to internet versus emerging interest in crypto payments. So in the 3 months it was active, it managed to amass $23 million in extorted money. Because of the way crypto ransomware works, payment was done in Bitcoin into a single wallet. So everybody was able to look into how much money they have made. And for once, this scared the hell out of consumers and law enforcement agencies. But not least, it inspired other cyber criminals. Because of that pressure of being chased by international law enforcement agencies, the CryptoLocker gang disappeared, went somewhere on a sunny beach, sipping mojitos, and enjoying the reaps of the $23 million extorted. It was rapidly replaced by CryptoWall, a much more enterprising business that in about 1 year of operation managed to amass $380 million in extorted money. So these $380 million without any risk harvested in 1 year were like the tipping point for ransomware success. Now going a couple of years further, in 2018, ransomware became democratized. It started being delivered as a service, and just one gang, GandCrab, was responsible for 1 in 2 ransomware attacks around the globe. That was 50% market share going to one single enterprising threat actor. And when they dismantled in 2019, they mentioned that they have made $2 billion in fraudulent money just by extorting consumers and businesses alike. Ransomware is now a thing, and it was accelerated by the pandemic, as I'm going to show you a couple of slides later. So fast forward to 2021, when ransomware became a threat to national security. If you have been looking at what happened with the Colonial Pipeline and DarkSide, a ransomware attack managed to bring the economy of the United States to a halt for more than a week. That's incredible pressure, and that's extremely bold for a threat actor. So in the pandemic, we have identified that ransomware attacks have grown at a rate of about 485% every year. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, that's 485%. We are tracking multiple families of ransomware now. We had Avedon, DarkSide, Revol, along with smaller players in the industry. Ransomware shows at a rate of about 12 new families, 12 new actors every single month. But the top of this food chain is made by big players operating ransomware as a service. Again, during the pandemic, there were a couple of changes. Ransomware was no longer delivered through spam emails. It was mostly focused on stolen access credentials because people were working at home, and most system administrators were not had not implemented secure remote access inside the company. Many employees have left remote desktop protocol open at the office and logging in from outside. Pair that with stolen credentials and you'll realize how easy it was for cyber criminals to just purchase access credentials into a company, log into via RDP, and then deploy ransomware to that computer. With that lateral movement, then it was just a matter of time until the ransomware reached the critical systems inside the company and held everything hostage. You can see that with the Colonial Pipeline, with a couple of supermarket food chains in Sweden, and dozens of other businesses who have not even reported ransomware attacks. New threat vectors have also been used for ransomware deployment in 2021. Look at what happened in with the Kaseya incident, where cyber criminals, extremely bold ransomware operators, have gained access to the internal systems and have sent ransomware to thousands of customers at the same time. That was one of the most frightening and one of the most reinforcing displays of power we have ever seen in the ransomware market. As I said before, most of these ransomware attacks that we see growing because of our telemetry are not reported by victims. And this is bad because law enforcement investigations usually kick in when a significant number of victims report the same crime over and over again. So if you know of a ransomware attack, or if you are involved in the research of a ransomware attack, be sure to notify law enforcement agencies for them to be able to prioritize research of that ransomware, for them to be able to budget law enforcement investigations, and so on. In terms of verticals, this is nice. This graphic shows the most targeted verticals by ransomware in August 2021. Throughout the pandemic, healthcare was one of the most important victims of ransomware because of the criticality of the service. Ransomware operators usually target mission-critical services and verticals, and healthcare was one of them throughout the pandemic. Now it has moved to something that's a little bit more evergreen, telecommunications, which can be assimilated to critical infrastructure now that they are the lifeline of business and social communications in a world that keeps us apart as a distance. What we do to prevent ransomware? Well, we're a cybersecurity company, so we do plenty. I'm going to talk about solutions a little bit later. I would like to come with a good news for a while. We have started a decryption program in 2015, and throughout time we have released 20 decryptors for major ransomware attacks. We have helped over 100,000 customers I would refer as victims in both home and enterprise environments. And we managed to save a couple of $100 million in unpaid ransom. This is important. If you look at the scale of what we're saving versus what we're not saving, that's dimes a dollar, right? It's a couple of $100 million as opposed to billion of dollars who still make it to the bad guys. But what is important to remember here is that these $100 million saved weaken operators because they're cutting off supplies. They don't have access to easy money anymore, and they struggle for every payment to happen. Secondly, the emergence of decryptors weakens trust of affiliates and creates internal struggle. Whenever we come out with a new decryptor, we monitor the dark web where affiliates and ransomware developers talk. And there's always an internal struggle. How could Bitdefender get to the keys? What do they know and we do not? Why we should be still doing business with you, provided that your ransomware is not that difficult to crack? And this helps us because whenever their morale is down, their operations are down. Last but not least, the availability of decryptors help the consumer. It establishes a positive mindset. They know that eventually a decryptor will be available and that decryptor will save them money. So they're not that eager to pay up to the bad guys to get their information back. Think of a home user. They have pictures, right? Images that they have stored throughout the years. But they don't really need access to these images right now. It's not critical. It would be nice to have them, but the prospect of them being able to get the information back 2 or 3 years from now is not a lost cause. It prevents them from paying up to $5,000, $10,000 to the bad guys because they know help will be coming. It's just a matter of time. And we have established this positive mindset not only with consumers but also with businesses. They can get their information back from partial backups or from paperwork and get the non-critical information at a later time when we will come up with a decryptor. It's nice, decrypting ransomware is good, but it's not everything. It's just half of the story. Because ransomware still keeps thriving, right? Everybody who pays ransom contributes directly to the development of ransomware. Emerging ransomware groups are becoming harder and harder to disrupt. Look at Revil / Sodinokibi. Maybe you know them by either of the names. These people have been active for more than 1 year. They have been making millions of dollars. They have been attacking large companies. They have been disrupted in a law enforcement investigation, but they're not dead. They have just taken a short break between July and September, and now they are back. They are becoming more and more resilient to cyber attacks. Gaps in ransomware families that are disappearing are more rapidly filled in by new contenders. If you disrupt 2 or 3 ransomware players, new ones will join the packs because they now have access to technology and they are very motivated because they know at the end they will be making a lot of money. Last but not least, there was a paradigm shift in January this year. Ransomware was all about restricting access to information. But as IT administrators have become smarter and smarter and more focused on creating backups to prevent data loss, cyber criminals had to improvise, and they're now stealing information. Before encrypting data, they will exfiltrate whatever intellectual property you have, paperwork, contracts, documents, confidential things that affect if published. And they threaten that if you don't want the information back, no problem, you can get away with that. But if you don't pay up, you're still running the risk of having that information exposed. So this makes everything a little bit more challenging for us. This is why prevention is more important than curing. We all have access to doctors, but it's better if you're not sick in the first place. And for that, we as a cybersecurity company are making all the efforts. Detection and prevention are some of our key focuses. I'm not sure how familiar you are with Bitdefender, but we're one of the largest cybersecurity vendors in the world. We have spent most of the past 20 years as the #1 product when it comes to detection and prevention of malware outbreaks. And we also have managed detection and response services available to companies that cannot take care of their own cybersecurity. Another important thing is the capabilities to monitor the alerts. Everybody has EDR, XDR, /DRs, everything. But it's very difficult to make sense out of those alerts because there's a lot of noise and you need specialized people and you need hired technicians who can tell an important incident from noise. If you have that skill set in-house, make sure that you get alerts for the telltale signs of ransomware, MOTET activity, TrickBot activity, detection of mimikatz on the network, because this is one of the top choices for lateral movement still, or the use of PowerShell. Most ransomware operators use living off the land attacks as they move across the network. I hope this was convincing. A couple of numbers about Bitdefender to understand why our expertise stem from. We serve about 30 billion threat queries a day through our cloud. We analyze about 420 new threats per minute. We have a task force of about 300 malware researchers in the offices in Iași, Cluj, Timișoara, and Bucharest. And we have 400 engineers working around the clock to deliver products to the people. We also have a pretty compelling offering for consumers and businesses. This is
so you know.
A quick overview of our gravity zone architecture. My colleague Andrei Ioniță is in the back of the audience, so if you have any questions about the product or our capabilities as a company, please reach out to him. With that out of the way, I think we're ready for questions and answers. So, Stefan, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. The work that are doing with it's pretty impressive. We're gonna start moving to the speaker because we're already out of time. So Lucian, the floor is yours, the mic is yours. Let's see the view from Bit Sentinel side of things. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Before I start, let me share the screen for a second. I don't know if you all can see the presentation. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So, hello everyone. My name is Lucian Icescu. I'm a senior specialist at Bit Sentinel. Today I'm presenting about a paper called Predictive Model for Software Vulnerability Management in Telecommunication Infrastructure that was presented during the International Black Sea Conference on Communication Networking, or in short, Black CCON. So before I go in deep of this paper, I will like to say a few words about Bit Sentinel. So we at Bit Sentinel like to say, and we actually work hard to be able to say that we have a one-stop shop for cybersecurity services. Mainly our profession services are ranging from penetration testing to incident response. And besides that, we have also a list of products and initiatives ranging from CyberEdu, which is a virtual polygon for learning and practicing cybersecurity, and Fish Enterprise, which is a cybersecurity awareness as a service platform with attack simulation training scenarios. Without further describing the services that we are offering at BitSentinel, let's go forward with the paper's authors. So here are the joint effort between Orange Romania and BitSentinel and the paper's authors of this predictive model. And you can also see on Constantin, which was the first, which held the first presentation of this panel, which is in the Development Innovation Department within Orange Romania. Okay, so objectives of this paper. So we identified several issues. There is an ongoing debate and struggle to define vulnerabilities, threats, and impact for all sorts of issues that arise from time to time. And for example, we have the National Institute Standards and Technology, or in short, NIST, that takes an average of 132 days to release an impact score to a new vulnerability. Mainly for our modeling, we took in consideration two well-known data sets. One is a known methodology for vulnerability scoring system. The common vulnerability scoring system is actually called. The other is the database including CVEs, which are vulnerabilities and threats identified during the time. We can get those data as a training input for our predictive model in order to be able to determine an impact score on those sets for any given vulnerability. Okay, moving forward, here is an example of a common vulnerability scoring system. We have the both standards, and both standards are still accepted at large for determining severity levels. And here is an example of those levels based on the output of the rating methodology. Those values can be computing using base score metrics or temporal score metrics and long scientific environment score metrics, but mainly this is the primary part of a CSS vector. As you can see, we have the CIA triad, the confidentiality, integrity, and viability impact. And also we have the access vector, the authentication vector. For example, if the attacker had to be authenticated in order to exploit a vulnerability, or if the attacker had to be locally on the system in order to exploit that one. Okay, moving further, I'm going to discuss why we picked the NVD by NIST, the National Vulnerability Database, mainly because it's a database containing common vulnerabilities and exposures that also have information regarding those two sets of scoring systems, and common weakness and enumeration by Mitre, and technical description of a specific vulnerability. So here is an example for vulnerability. I don't know if everyone recognizes it or if everyone can read it. It's pretty much an directory traversal vulnerability within the Next.js module, and it allowed attackers to perform a limited directory traversal vulnerability. Hence, the severity, it's rated medium on the risk vector, and we can observe the vectors on the right side here. Okay, moving further, I'm going to cover how our predictive model software is getting data and how is computing those data in order to make a prediction. So the logical steps are follows. We have the future extraction, CVE classifier, and base course classifiers that are based on the previous shown NVD data. We took those data and we run a model training over those in order to train our, let's say, predictive model. Based on that, we can receive any form of input, like a vulnerability description, in order to determine an impact score for that specific, let's say, threat. Moving forward, we have the predictive model. Here are some statistical information for how long does it take to train our predictive model with the given data sets. For example, if we take in consideration only the base score, it will take under 30 minutes to have a trained model in order to make approximate determination of those vulnerabilities. But if we train our predictive model based on more data sets that are provided within the NVD database, then we will also require longer time, but we'll have better and better results. So as an example, here we have a practical bot. It's a common POC of a Telegram bot that we provided vulnerability description of a local file inclusion. And he was able to determine a risk vector, a score, and of course, we also provided a reference to one of our calculator, public available calculator of the CSS, and also the common weakness enumeration. For example, knowing that we have a local file inclusion vulnerability, we have improper input validation, and it assumed, it determined, predicted that it also requires an unrestricted upload of file with dangerous type, meaning that in order to exploit a local file inclusion vulnerability, besides a remote one, you have to first have the payload on the server. And the predictive model was able to determine that fact and say with 21% confidence it's first required in order to exploit this vulnerability. So what are future improvements and works of this predictive model? So we would also would like to have a better feature processing and feature extraction. This is an ongoing task, is never going to be perfect, but it can be detailed in such a manner to explore, to make the predictive model more accurate in determining risk. We have also we are actively exploring the understanding the relation between CSS v2 vector and exploit likelihood or exploit predictability, meaning that if we want to determine if let's say a CVE is going to be exploited in the next 3 days or next 3 months, we can use this predictive model to determine that. We can derive the model training for the requirements in the third version of the severity severity standard. And also we can determine if an exploit is going to be likely to be available, publicly available, using data from open source intelligence or OSINT and honeypot activities. This predictive model was part of...
The time has run out, so we can jump to conclusions, would be great. Thanks.
I have 2 more slides. Following this predictive model was developed within the Resisto platform, which is a Horizon 2020 project under the European Commission. And the main idea is that the predictive models can be used in conjunction with resilience enhancement platforms to accurately predict the impact of known vulnerability that has not been yet patched or prioritized by the vulnerability management process. Meaning that nowadays that we are living a pandemic, we can rely on such a predictive model in order to prioritize those vulnerabilities that are likelihood to happen and to be critical for any sort of company. So I try to go fast through the whole presentation. If you have any technical questions about how this predictive model works or any services that we are providing, you can find me at this email address. And that was it. I don't know, any questions or?
Lucian, thank you so much. I don't think there's any questions from the audience. And for myself, I would like to say thank you to all the speakers that we had today. And thank you to everyone who attended this 11th edition of the CERT Romania conference. And with this in mind, I wish you have a great day and stay safe in cyberspace.